And here I am, the Canadian commie. Here I am. So, guys, it's just a burnout day, man. Holy cow. Capitalism is just burning me out. Something I've been thinking about. I listened to an interview done on the Katie Halper show. I forget the name of the fellow offhand, but he was talking about nuclear bombs and like nuclear war. And it really got me thinking, like, man, yeah, like, Americans have used nuclear bombs before. That, why do we have these nuclear bombs? What are we doing with them? And I feel like if we used nuclear bombs in today's environment, I just don't think, I just don't know that I would ever recover from it. I feel like my brain would just not recover. Straight up. I think I would just short circuit. Compton, Gerst, we'll count it. Compton, you're always good for a laugh. I value and appreciate you for that. Oh, man. Yeah, I feel it, man. I feel it. I feel like, and I feel it in the atmosphere. I think that there's lots of, I feel like everybody's fighting burnout. I feel like everybody's fighting burnout. Thanks, Major. Just for you, bud. Just for you, the beautiful singing voice. Like, I take a look at, like, a Hassan stream, for example, and the news of Joe Biden canceling 10K student loan forgiveness, which, of course, now you're getting the fascists are being open about why that's a bad idea, right? Student loan forgiveness undermines one of our military's greatest recruitment tools at a time of dangerously low enlistments. Just outright admitting, like, yeah, we need to extort people and force them into peonage so that we can get them into the military. And if we don't do that, then we're not going to have a military enlistment. And man, I'm hearing about hunger stones, and I'm just feeling like this is Dark Souls. What's hunger stones? What's hunger stones, Compton? Hunger stones is a type of hydrological watermark common in Central Europe. They serve as famine memorials. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Creepy things. Yeah, I mean, like, life is kind of creepy, isn't it? That's something I think that's actually also happening a bit. So to finish the one story before I move on to this, so you watch Hassan, right? And we're talking about the Biden administration doing student loan forgiveness and all this kind of and all it kind of says, and Hassan is just like, he's trying to be really optimistic and upbeat and like, look, this is a win and people are getting a reduction and like all this kind of stuff, and I appreciate that, but I feel like that's like a form of fighting against burnout. It's just a way to be like, yeah, optimism, we can do it, right? And it isn't like it's nothing. I think that's true. Like, I don't want to sit here and be like, rah, 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 rah about it. Yeah, Dark Brandon rises and smites down the oligarchy with his mighty paw, you know? And I don't want to be completely negative about it, obviously. But, like, it's not a fundamental structural change. It's not going to, that debt cancellation is bullshit. I went through college, paid my way, I have no debt. These idiots with degrees in worthless subjects get 10K off. I would like to challenge you, John, on the idea of worthless subjects, right? I have a degree in theater, okay? So you want to talk to people with degrees in what's called worthless subjects. Well, hello, hi, that would be me. My argument has always been, and will always remain, that the role of education is not merely to give a person a vocation in a capitalist society, a job, right? That it is to improve the quality of the citizenry. That I used to be a fundamentalist Christian, and now I am not. And I think that I have my education to thank for that. For a good degree of it. For a good amount of it. And from my perspective, that alone is a dramatic win, is an enormous win for the society, for myself personally, for any kind of system or structure, to have citizens cast off their superstitions, cast off their religious ideologies, begin to recognize what is real and actually happening around them. And I think all of that is true outside of the concept of, oh, I got a degree that's worth something to a capitalist. That I can now go work in a vocation, right? I'm useful to capitalists now. And I am more or less of the opinion that your rage, by the way, about having to pay your way and all of that, like, the system should have never been a debt-based system in the first place. So I would also challenge you and argue that your rage is not against the people who are quote unquote getting an easier way, right, or any of that kind of stuff. These idiots with worthless degrees, such as myself. Who you're actually angry at are the people who erected a debt-based system in the first place. And we know who those people are. As Biden cancels some student debt, remember why the debt exists. A key Reagan advisor warned in 1970 that free college was producing the dangerously explosive dynamite of an educated proletariat. And we have to be selective on who we allow to go through higher education. Here's the quote. Later in 1970, Roger Freeman, a key educational advisor to Nixon, then worked for the re-election of California Governor Ronald Reagan, spelled out quite precisely that the conservative counterattack was aiming at preventing. We are in danger of producing an educated proletariat. That's dynamite. We have to be selective on who we allow to go through higher education. If not, we will have a large number of highly trained and unemployed people. The two most menacing institutional forces of the danger described by Freeman were obviously those two great public university systems charging no tuition, the University of California and the University of New York. Governor Reagan was able to wipe out free tuition at the University of California. The quote goes on. John, keeping it light, I like it. You're wrong, John. Is a high priest of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, as I have been touched by his noodly appendages. The Flying Spaghetti Monster pisses me off so much. When I was a fundamentalist Christian, it pissed me off because I was, because it's an insult, right, obviously, which is fine. I don't mind that now. But the thing that kind of makes me a little upset about the Flying Spaghetti Monster now is that it's an inaccurate parody, right? It's a straw man, ultimately. Like, it's a straw man, ultimately. That the Flying Spaghetti Monster isn't actually what the theologians and what the Christians are actually talking about, right? And so when you engage on those lines, it's easy to get dismissed. So I don't think it's effective. I think it's fun, right? I think it's fun for the people who like it, and it's enjoyable for people within the circle, right? But I don't think it's effective in terms of its communicative quality. Although some of the pictures that have come out about the Flying Spaghetti Monster, I think are really good. Like, Flying Spaghetti Monster. There's a Flying Spaghetti Monster prayer. I am the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Thou shalt have no other monsters before me. Afterwards is okay. Just use protection. The only monster who deserves capitalization is me. Other monsters are false monsters, undeserving of capitalization. Yeah, there it is. These pictures are the best. These are the best, dude. Yeah, as a Dudist minister. Look, you can read the theologians, right? Like, their work is available. The theologian that I think makes the transition the easiest for secularists is Isaac Newton, because Isaac Newton he's like the Rosetta Stone, right? The problem with going back and reading the old theologians, like Augustine or Aquinas or any of these guys, is that they're speaking in a language that is incomprehensible to us. We don't know what they mean when they say these things, right? And that we tend to have a literal reading of things, right? Because we haven't been trained. Like, what is the blood of the Lamb? What is that even? What is the Trinity even? Like, what are these concepts and ideas, right? Because that's what they're doing, basically, is they're trying to formulate concepts and ideas that otherwise don't exist. And in a post-Enlightenment world, we don't, the language has shifted to a more scientific, literal language, right? And so we don't really speak in illusion and allegory. We don't really speak in these sorts of things. Newton did. So Newton's the Rosetta Stone, right? That he has a good foot planted in the theology of old, but he was also pretty central in the Enlightenment movement, right? And shifting into this literalization. And so you go and read some of the stuff that he wrote, and he was writing very clearly in a way that anyone could understand about what it was the theologians were talking about. And it has nothing to do with this. This is fun, don't get me wrong, but like, you start having kind of a more serious conversation about it. Blood of the Lamb is lamb sauce, you fucking muppet. Angry Gordon Ramsay noises. I love that I'm trying to, like, ground this conversation back into the earth, and John Smith is not having it. You're just like, fuck you, John. You know what, John? You know what, John? I appreciate this. You know what? I feel like today is a day when I need people to be doing that to me. Just absolutely saying, go fuck yourself, John. Because it's like, yeah, I feel that way very much. I feel that way very much. Still feel weird about trying to God alive for what? To abstain from butt sex? I mean, we don't know the Abrahamic God does for us now, especially because such a God is... I am the anti-John. I guess so. I guess so. Yeah, like what? That's a fair question, actually, Cotton. Like, why are we keeping the concept of God alive, right? Like that God, as Isaac Newton and the rest of them said, God is the collection of all things, right? It's the singular energy. I say the quantum energy, right, all the time, basically, end every video I've got with that. So why does it even matter? And I think it matters for a few reasons. I think that there is a reason for keeping the concept of God alive within the consciousness of man. I think that of humanity, which is to say that if you believe or understand that the energy that we live in is itself alive, right? That's a more interesting question to me than does God exist, right? Is the universe alive? I think that that's a more pointed and poignant question. And if you believe that the universe itself is a living organism and a living creature or a living being of some kind, right? Well, you're probably going to be a little less likely to drill holes into it, right? You're probably going to be a little more careful, right? Dude, I'm not here for the theology debates. I'm here for the good time and shitpost theology and philosophy or topics, or when in the mood. Yeah, whatever, dude. No judgment from me whatsoever. Theology is like, it's my favorite thing to talk about. I love talking about it. Like it's. I've always. Why are you making me say it, Marked? How does Cart of El Salat become Iadap Fesalad? Dude, come on, Marked. Can you interpret this for us, please? If you get me talking about theology, I'm going to talk about theology, guys. It's my favorite thing to talk about. Like, no two ways about it. It's my favorite thing to talk about it. And to Compton's point, right? If you believe the universe is alive, if you believe the Earth is alive, you're probably going to be less likely to blow it up, right? You're going to probably walk around thinking that blowing things up should be done with great care and consideration, right? Because not only is it a human concern, but it's also of concern to the larger, wider system. And in many ways, the environmental movement, right? Like, because the environmentalist movement is still very human-centered, right? That we need to protect ourselves, and we do that by protecting our environment. I'm more a fan of the Catholic Church. Oh, the pedophiles, eh? They're the ones that catch John's attention. How does potato salad become potato salad? Mark, what are you doing to me right now, bud? But John, I think you and I are alive. Ergo, we must be serious about not heat-deathing ourselves. Yes, absolutely that's true. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I do think, though, that, like... And I also think it's kind of important just from strictly a... like, half the culture is still bought in to this kind of stuff. And I just don't think it's enough... I just don't think it's enough to put it aside and pretend like it doesn't exist. Right? Like, all that's really seemed to have done is opened up the door to charlatans and frauds. Right? That has little to do with if electricity has an opinion. But I do think that it's, like, to me it's about humility, right? It's about, like, this view of self-survival, right? This view of self-survival. Like, it still has allowed, like, liberals, for example, to play at this net zero game, right? That we can still play with this kind of thing. And there's a very kind of, like, eco-fascist way of looking at survival of the species, right? The strong will survive, all of this kind of stuff. And I really do think that if a culture actually genuinely believes that the earth itself, that the energy we live in itself is alive. And I don't mean alive in, like, this kind of, like, odd, like, oh, this guy's jerking off, oh my god, kind of creepy way that modern Christians talk about it. Like, if it were alive, it would be more akin, like, our relationship to it would be more akin to, like, we would be red blood cells in the body of whatever this thing is, right? That we would be so small that, and anything that we do, so if we set off a nuke in our own atmosphere, right, it would be like the equivalent of the system going, right? And they're going to do something about that. And we're probably not going to like it, right? And I think it's perfectly possible that the system that we live in has just natural systems in place, so that should we begin offending it in such a way, it will respond, right? Like, if something goes wrong inside of your own body, you know, white blood cells show up and start fucking around and start doing stuff. And I feel like we would do to walk around this place with a little bit more fear and awe and respect. And I think that the place where that fear and awe should be rooted should be in even the contemplation. I don't care if you accept it. Like, really, I don't. Right? But even in the contemplation of the idea that the systems that we live in and the ecosystem that we live in may itself have its own consciousness and may itself be alive, which is the religious question, right? That is the religious question. Like, is this thing alive? And a lot of the theologians thought that it was completely self-evident. You know, a lot of people. Yeah, the white blood cells are the UFOs. Exactly. Dude, I hope something really cool happens with the UFO. I gotta tell you. Let's pivot away from theology into UFOs. Let's talk about something else equally as kooky. I actually hope that the UFOs are not extraterrestrial beings. I hope that the UFOs are like some kind of atmospheric whale. That's what I hope. I hope it's like an atmospheric whale that we have not yet been able to detect except recently because of the increase of technology, and that the increase of carbon emissions into the atmosphere has made it so that we can see them more easily. And that we are actually seeing, we're not seeing extraterrestrial aliens from another planet or another civilization, but we're seeing like essentially space whales. I think that would be cool if it turned out that they were space whales. Ugh. The chronology of the universe describes the history and future of the universe according to Big Bang cosmology. Yeah. Like, yeah. Like, this is the timeline. This is what we're talking about. See, the theologian would say, yeah, like, this exists, certainly, here it is. But this is the process of creation. Right? We've been worshiping space whales all this time. Apparently, we're almost halfway through the universe life. All right, cool. Cool. So we think this is going to, like, expand and then collapse. I love this kind of thing because it is like, what are we doing here? Like, what is this thing? What are we experiencing? What is the point of any of this? Right? Like, that's something I think about all the time. You know, like, you wake up, you go to work in the middle of this apocalypse, and like, why? What is this? What is this? And it just seems like we're not supposed to talk about it. Or that if we do talk about it, it's very materialistic. Like, it's very like, it's very like, yeah, materialistic. It's very, this goes this and this, like, it's like you're making a potato person or something, or a person out of clay, and the wider questions of the whole thing kind of get put to the side. And yeah, like, when I was coming up, even as a fundamentalist Christian, like, the fundamentalist Christians, except the like really kooky, like super ultra far right guys, they don't nobody denies this anymore. Not really. Like, I shouldn't say that. You still have, like, Ken Ham's University, where they're, like, talking about how the Earth is 6,000 years old and all that kind of stuff. So I shouldn't say that. But I think the Big Bang has gotten wide approval, even in theological circles. It's just that theologians will say, oh, this is the process of creation. This is how God created the universe and how the universe came into being, right? And because it's understood that God is the force of creation itself, right? Anyway, I worry I chase people away when I start talking about this, so let's actually get into the news. I blame you, John. I blame you. You got me talking about theology and all this. Let's get rid of this. The Hunger Stone. Hey. I did want to report on a few good things, I think, that are happening before we get into the horror show, right? California to cover canal with solar panels in experiment to fight drought and climate change. Also, California to approve 2035 ban on gas-powered car sales. I think this is a bit too late in the game, frankly. 2035. It's like 13 years. But they are essentially putting a ticking clock on the idea of having electrical cars, right? You put a ticking time bomb, you put a ticking clock on this, right? So California, God of the gaps? Internal combustion for life, brutal. California to cover canal with solar panels in experiment to fight drought, climate change. Is this what we're talking about? God of the gaps? I'm confused. But California is about to launch an experiment to cover aqueducts with solar panels, a plan that if scaled up might save billions of gallons of otherwise evaporated water while powering millions of homes. Project Nexus in the Turlock Irrigation District launches in mid-October amid Western North America's worst drought in 1,200 years, and as human-influenced climate change exacerbates the dry spell. The $20 million project, funded by the state, is due to break ground in 2 locations. One is a 500-foot span along a curved portion of the canal in the town of Hickman, or about 100 miles inland from San Francisco. The other is a mile-long straightaway in nearby Ceres. Based on a similar project in the West Indian state of Gujarat, the project is the first of its kind in the United States, said University of California Merced project scientist Brandy McEwen. The Turlock project was inspired by a research paper McEwen published in 2021. Modern California was built thanks to 20th century infrastructure that delivers water from the wet north to the arid south. A network McEwen said now totals 4,000 miles of canals. Covering those canals with solar panels would reduce evaporation, avoid using other land for solar farms, and reduce aquatic weed and algae growth, saving on maintenance costs, McEwen said. It's really exciting to test our hypothesis, and the paper we published. We'll have an opportunity to really understand if those benefits pencil out in the real world, McEwen said. It would also help California meet its renewable energy goal of achieving 50% clean energy generation by 2025 and 60% by 2030. If all 4,000 miles of canals were covered with solar panels, it could produce 13 gigawatts of renewable capacity, roughly half of what California needs to meet its carbon-free energy goals, she said. Man, John's spicy in the chat today, dude. Those idiots in California want some of our Minnesota water, but we said no and made a law about out-of-state water exports. I mean, to me, this sort of seems like California is starting to realize it's going to have to do it alone. You know, I feel like that's something, since the Trump administration especially, I feel like anytime I tune into California politics and see what's going on in California, it really is like the state is basically just saying, okay, we got to do it, and we got to do it alone. We don't have a choice, right? California is expected on Thursday to approve a ban on the sale of new gas-powered cars that would begin in 2035. The state's Air Resources Board on Thursday will vote on the ban, which would also ratchet up the percentage of vehicles sold in the state that are electric leading up to the 2035 date. California's clear car standards are also often adopted by other states, so the impact of this rule could stretch far beyond its borders. Gas-powered cars are a major source of climate warming emissions and other air pollutants, and the measure has been touted as an attempt to both tackle climate change and improve public health. In 2020, California Governor Gavin Newsom issued an executive order seeking to phase out the sale of gasoline-powered cars by 2035. But Thursday's action will actually put that goal in motion. The California plan is more ambitious than federal goals. President Biden said last year that he hoped that half of new vehicle sales would be electric by 2030. That year, California's regulations would mandate 68% of vehicle sales in the state are electric. Automakers in recent months have moved towards increasing electric vehicle sales, with several making pledges to increase the proportion of vehicles they sell that are electric. Nevertheless, this week, some in the industry criticized California's forthcoming regulation as difficult for companies to comply with. Yeah, difficult for companies to comply with. Suck it up, Buttercup. Oh no, your profit margin. John Bozzoletta, president of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation Trade Group, described the standards as extremely challenging in a written statement. Whether or not these requirements are realistic or achievable is directly linked to external factors like inflation, charging and fuel infrastructure, supply chains, labor, critical mineral availability and pricing, and the ongoing semiconductor shortage, he said. These are complex, intertwined, and global issues well beyond the control of either the California Air Resources Board or the auto industry. Gotta try, right? So we've got California actually trying to do something about climate change and actually looking at doing stuff. Meanwhile, of course, while this is going on in California, Elon Musk is doing everything he can to prevent the spread of the idea of high-speed rail transit, which is exactly what we need. Like we've got to get people not only just away from electric, like fossil fuel cars, but away from cars in general. That the idea of everyone relying exclusively on like single passenger vehicles or 5 passenger vehicles with one person driving them, it's just kind of got to go. You know, we can build high speed rail systems. We should build high speed rail systems in order to improve transit. But of course, that doesn't enrich the auto sector. So people like Elon Musk get in the way of it. Because what's Elon Musk, right? He's Tesla. He's an auto manufacturer. He doesn't want to see trains. He doesn't want to see that kind of stuff. So, but still, people pushing in the right direction. What's going on in the chat today, guys? I feel like every so often the chat gets a little wonky and a little weird, right? Mock's statement, of course, I love. This is bad because it costs X amount of papers. That's right. Yeah, we can't do that. That costs some dollars, some money dollars. Anemone, how are you doing? Good evening to you. I'm so glad that you guys are here. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. I feel a little weird today, I have to be honest. I feel a little weird because of the conversation that's going on with Clara Sorrenti. I think I have to voice it and air it and get it out of my system. That I worry that people look at what I've been saying and think less of me for the statements I made. When in reality, like, I just find the whole thing to be very disturbing, what's happening to her. I wish her nothing but the best. And I wish it wasn't happening to her. And the truth is that even if she says that it is happening because of trans rights and this sort of stuff, I still want to claim her as a communist. Like, I still want to protect her as a communist, and I still want to have her be protected. That's the thing that's kind of so frustrating about the whole conversation, is that like even if it comes down to like nobody gave a shit, well, but that's something that's kind of bugs me too, you know, that I'm just being told over and over again, like nobody gives a shit that she was a communist. I'm just like, that's frustrating. Nobody gives a shit. Like, so it doesn't matter at all. Right? So all of the abuse and all of the shittiness and all of the nonsense that I tolerate and put up with for calling myself a communist You know, why don't I just start like a little kooky bread cult? I feel like the channel would do better if I was just like a weird little cult. You know? I love that Conton and John are having a conversation about California's success in an invasion of Minnesota. I don't think that would be very successful, guys. I gotta tell you. Right? I do think that California has the edge. Right? Call it John Ewism. Oh, God. Why John Ewism? Why not just Johnism? Right? I could be a Johnist. So hold on, wait a second. California, Minnesota. Guys, California invading Minnesota, like, that basically turns, like, all of this just into the Badlands, right? Like, all of this is just, like, California coming over to invade Minnesota. Dude, no. Like, no, that's not gonna happen, right? California's not gonna go over and invade Minnesota. What a problem. What a series of problems this would be. The supply chain alone. Come on, guys. Think clearly for a minute here, okay? If California is going to invade anything, it's going to be like Nevada or Arizona or Oregon, right? Or Mexico, right? They're not going to invade Minnesota. That's right. And also, Minnesota are the descendants of Viking warriors, right? The Minnesota Vikings. You know, that's not playing around. Yeah, get a green screen for a bread background and a bread hat. Yeah. And my absolute favorite part about this is that people would say to me, hey, John, you must really love bread. And I'd be like, oh, I'm actually gluten intolerant. California would roll, like, why is California invading Minnesota anyway? Liberate Baja. You know what, guys? I feel like this is it. This is what I'm talking about. We're all so fucking burnt out. Don't you feel it? Don't you feel it in the air? I can feel it calling in the air tonight. Oh, Lord. It's like nobody wants to actually, like, look at it anymore. You know? You guys are, like, tuning in because you like me. I'm a nice guy, right? But, like, blame it on the humidity. Nobody wants any of those hot shits areas that's hot. The Dakotas would love to get a piece of liberal California. I love that we've got a fight brewing here. I love it. Let's go. Toronto shelter says 1/3 of its residents are students. This is a story that really actually shocked me, right? That it's unusual for a story to come through that really gobsmacks me, but this gobsmacks me. Supply squeeze has pushed rents up 20% in Canada's largest city last year. Mark Aston has met hundreds of teenagers and young adults at the youth homeless shelter he manages, but he will never forget the first time a Toronto Metropolitan University mechanical engineering student walked through his doors in 2019. She was out of options. After a family breakdown, she couldn't go home, and she lacked the money to support herself in Toronto's red-hot housing market, forcing her to turn to the shelter for help. I was astounded for a whole number of reasons, Aston said. One, that somebody could actually have that much turmoil going on in their life, that much instability, and yet continue to perform and stay in a really high-demand course. In 2019, 26% of the residents of Covenant House Toronto, the shelter where Aston works, were students, of which half were college or university students. Today, Aston estimates the student total is closer to 1/3 and may rise as rents soar. It's very much a trend that has mirrored the affordability issues with rental housing in Toronto. Toronto and Vancouver have among the tightest rental markets in North America's major metropolitan areas, according to data compiled from the U.S. Census Bureau and the annual rental market report by Canada's Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Among the condominiums that have constituted the bulk of new rental supply in the Canadian cities in recent times, the vacancy rate stands at just 0.8% in Vancouver and 1.6% in Toronto. Lack of supply is one of the reasons rents for one-bedroom apartments have increased 20% since last year, with monthly costs now averaging $2,269 across Greater Toronto. The end of COVID restrictions has meant increasing demand for housing in city centres. Rising mortgage rates are putting more pressure on rents by pricing many prospective homebuyers out of the market. Toronto's mayor, John Tory, is running for re-election on a housing affordability platform, but adding new stock will take time. Because heaven forbid we cap this shit, right? Heaven forbid we say, no, fuck you, don't rise the rent, eat it, I don't give a shit. Like this idiotic neoliberal idea that the rent must go up. No, it must not. The rent is going up because these guys are extorting us. It's as simple as that, right? Nationwide, Canada needs to build an extra 3.5 million units to achieve affordability, said Aled Ayorworth, Deputy Chief Economist at the CMHC. We need more supply. We need more diversity of supply. And look how hard they're working to not talk about the house hoarding, right? We know that they're hoarding supply. I've reported it several times on this channel that the billionaire class is hoarding up supply. We know it's happening, and it's just not talked about. Just completely not talked about. University tuition is heavily subsidized in Canada. Domestic undergraduate students pay on average $6,693, much lower than the US, but residence costs can add another $13,000 to $22,000 a year, and most schools only guarantee housing to students in first year. University students, especially those from low-income families or lacking family support, are among the most vulnerable to fluctuations in housing. Aside from finding affordable rent, many have to manage the costs of food, transportation, and tuition, while working entry-level minimum wage jobs. There are grants and loans available through the government as well as some university supports, but eligibility criteria stop some from applying, and the amounts are not always sufficient. At Horizons for Youth, a Toronto shelter for teenagers and young adults aged 16 to 24, the average stay before the pandemic was 3 months, said case manager Sarah Juggernaut. Now it's closer to 6 months to a year, and demand keeps rising. A second-year computer science student at the University of Toronto who asked that his name not be used arrived at the shelter after his university dormitory access ran out at the end of the first year. He tried looking for a basement apartment or a roommate who could share costs, but couldn't find anything affordable. As he prepares to begin classes again next month, he says he's anxious about the workload and worried about how he'll manage the commute from the shelter, which can take up to an hour. When a kid turns 18, people think they're adults, so they think they can handle all these responsibilities, said Joy Edobor, Development and Communications Associate at Horizons for Youth. And when you're living in Toronto and you have to think of all these expenses, it's a lot to manage for a young adult. He was the valedictorian in his high school. This is a system of abandonment. That's what this is, right? And what's the result of this going to be, right? What's the result of all of this actually going to be? As my chat descends into Dadaism, I think that's a good way of saying it, Radio Halifax. A bit of Dadaism in the chat, which I don't mind. I got to tell you, it's nice. For those of you at home who are just listening, the chat is having a robust discussion about the success of California's inevitable invasion of Minnesota. What's going to be the result of all of this kind of stuff is that you just are going to end up with a less educated workforce, a less educated society. And just a society that's going to fall into superstition and stupidity at the drop of a hat, right? A society that won't be able to actually get anything done, and certainly won't be able, if you think about it, if all you care about is the rugged capitalism, right, the rugged individualistic capitalism, well, you're certainly not going to be able to compete with China, right? You're certainly not going to be able to compete on the world stage as the rest of the world figures out that it's an extremely bad idea to abandon your students and plunge them into debt peonage. It's an extremely bad idea to do this, because even if they're taking the quote-unquote worthless degrees, right, they're certainly not going to be able to do anything with them because of the structure of the economy that we have done. And the idea that we can't afford it, I think, is childish, right? Mexico offers free education, right? There are small countries that offer free education because it's just part of the structure of the society, right? It's really asinine to believe that we can fund a public education system that everybody goes through, so we teach them things like reading and writing and math, right? But we can't extend that any further so that they can learn some very serious things about the nature of their society, right? Hey DM, how you doing? Hi John. Well, hi DM. Happy Thursday, fellow comrades. I can't help but smile every time I play Pierre Poilievre's Breakfast at Denny's video speech explaining just inflation. Too funny. Our next PM. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a misnomer what he's doing, right? Like, it's just inflation is really good branding, right? But like, it's a way to deflect away from the fact that the oligarchy is the one raising the prices, right? That Trudeau is just sort of letting it happen, you know? But he knows who he's got to be fighting, and so he's doing good branding. And you're probably right. Like, I won't be too surprised to see Pierre Poilievre win the next election. Mark says Cuba spends the most on education, percentage of GDP in the world, but even Mexico spends more than the U.S. according to the World Bank. Yeah, because the goal of the education system is not to actually educate anybody, right? It's to make sure that you have a compliant workforce and one that is obedient. That's ultimately the only thing the education system really vets for, is that it's vetting for obedience and then competency, right? So if you have a low amount of obedience, it doesn't matter how competent you are, right? You'll be vetted out of the system. That's more or less the point. And if you have a high amount of obedience but a low amount of competency, you'll be vetted out of the system. And then if you have a high amount of competency and a high amount of obedience, then you get to become a corporate CEO. That's the system. That's the structure of it. And and it's a disaster for the society, right? It's a complete disaster for the society, because you end up with huge swaths of the society, huge swaths of the country or the state, who have no idea what the hell is going on, right? Who can be easily deceived by people who can come by and with the largest megaphone, who can just grift them. Lou, don't think I've ever seen you here before. Good to see you. Hope you're here to participate. Be lovely. Just figured out YouTube account. Hello, John. Hello, everyone. Good to see you, Lou. Always good to see a fresh face. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe, right? Hit the like button, hit the share button, tell people I exist. Let the world know, everybody. It actually does matter. The algorithm actually cares about those likes, right? It's like the number one thing, and it's so easy to do. A tsunami of shutoffs. 20 million U.S. homes are behind on energy bills, right? Like, so much for your individualism narrative, right? So much for your narrative of individuals individualizing their individualism, right? When you start to get these kinds of numbers, 20 million people, right? Like, in a society of 300 million, it's a little under 10%, right? 20 million U.S. homes behind on energy bills. So I guess those people are just lazy grifters, right? Adrienne Nice woke up early in the morning of July 25 to news she's been dreading. The power company Xcel Energy Inc. had shut off the electricity to the small Minneapolis apartment she shares with her teenage son, just as a heat wave was bearing down on the city. Nice had been struggling financially ever since the pandemic hit, racking up more than $3,000 in past due utility bills. The warnings she'd gotten on her monthly statement, final notice, scrawled in big, bold letters, had prepared her to some degree, but it was still jarring to find the fridge dark and the air conditioner silent. With temperatures to reach 95 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 35 degrees Celsius, in the coming days, she needed the power back on, and fast. The Nice household is one of some 20 million across the country, about 1 in 6 American homes, that have fallen behind on their utility bills. It is, according to the National Energy Assistance Directors Association, the worst crisis the group has ever documented. Underpinning those numbers is a blistering surge in electricity prices, propelled by the soaring cost of natural gas. Total U.S. overdue utility balance. You can see this little dip here probably has something to do with, the $1,000 check we gave. So that would cover about a third of Nice's utility bill, right? The power bill crisis is even more acute in Europe, where the spike in natural gas prices has been far greater in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Policymakers there have sprung into action, throwing billions of euros in aid at struggling families to help them pay bills. There's been no meaningful talk of doing anything on a similar scale in the U.S., where the hand-wringing has been dedicated, as always, to the gyrations of gasoline prices at the pump. Utility shutoffs can have deadly consequences, though, a risk that's becoming more palatable as summer heat shatters records. Already gut-punched by soaring prices for just about everything, more and more people are facing a choice among food, housing, and keeping the power on. I expect a tsunami of shutoffs, said Jean Su, a senior attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity, which tracks utility disconnections across the U.S. Nice, 45, is a house cleaner. Her work dried up almost overnight when COVID-19 swept through Minnesota in early 2020. Things are picking up again, but inflation is eating into the money she makes. Just filling up her old Saturn sedan to drive from house to house now costs about $50 a week. She found it impossible to set aside enough money for utilities, especially as her power bill effectively doubled over the past year. A friend who used to live in the apartment along with her 2 kids moved out in mid-2021. But though Nice's household is using less electricity, she's still getting charged about the same amount per month, $244 on average. I just don't understand how electricity can be so high, she says. Year over year change, you can see, just chunk. And a lot of this is just due to overcharging, frankly. We know that something like 1/4 of the price increase is just that. It's just a price increase. Just literally corporations being like, well, where else are they going to go? Right? Like once they attain monopoly power, they can charge what they like. And they are. Good idea, this whole privatization thing, right? California's PG&E Corp has seen more than a 40% jump since February 2020 in the number of residential customers behind on payments. For New Jersey's Public Service Enterprise Group, the total is up more than 30% for customers at least 90 days late, and that's just since March. The average price consumers pay for electricity surged 15% in July from a year earlier, the biggest 12-month increase in the data since 2006. A jump of that magnitude isn't typical, and the gains are only poised to continue. Even in the free market-oriented U.S., regulation of electricity rates makes it hard for providers to immediately pass on higher fuel costs, so the recent hikes may just be the start. The U.S. is waking up to a problem that's plagued other parts of the world since last year. In Germany, the government slapped a levy of 296 on households to pay for natural gas as Russia squeezes energy flows to Europe after the invasion of Ukraine. In the UK, government supports for energy bills double to $482 for every household starting in October. But prices are rising so fast that the support might not be enough. More than 100,000 people have signed a pledge from campaign group Don't Pay UK to cancel their direct debit energy payments beginning in October. In Japan and Thailand, electricity bills are surging as the countries grapple with expensive fuel costs that have been made worse by their slumping currencies. Pakistan and Bangladesh, falling short in the global competition for costly fuel, have suffered from rolling blackouts and increasing power bills. In the early days of the pandemic, some states and utilities halted power disconnections, shielding customers like NICE who'd fallen on hard times. But those measures wound down just as inflation gathered steam. U.S. households owe about $16 billion in late energy bills, double the pre-pandemic total, according to NEDA. The average balance owed has climbed 97% since 2019 to $792. The bills just aren't affordable, says Mark Wolf, NEDA's executive director. People on the bottom, they can't pay this. For investor-owned U.S. utilities, the financial repercussions of accumulating debt from unpaid customer bills are typically limited. That's because state regulators often allow utilities to cover their losses by adding a charge for customers who are paying their bills, or taxpayers, to help pick up the tab. Isn't that fun? I love that so much. Where it's like, oh, we're going to privatize this, but if things go bad, we'll just subsidize it, right? In NICE's case, her power was out for only 3 days. The nonprofit Citizens Utility Board of Minnesota helped her negotiate a payment plan with Xcel. Her experience is common. Utilities shut off customers only as a last resort, according to Xcel. About 80% of U.S. utility customers who experience a shutoff will have service restored in a few days, Wolf says. The remaining 20%, though, may be close to eviction or on the verge of homelessness. While the U.S. government's Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LEHIP, helps low-income households pay energy bills, it doesn't come close to the scale of subsidies offered by some countries in Europe and Asia. Calls for states and the federal government to offer more assistance are starting to grow. A bipartisan group of almost 60 U.S. representatives and senators asked in early August for additional emergency funding beyond the $4 billion set aside for LEHIP for fiscal year 2023. California just passed a budget that will offer $1.4 billion to help residents pay past due utility bills. Entergy Corp agreed in July to a moratorium on shutoffs in New Orleans through October, after the city council asked the company to voluntarily halt disconnections during the summer heat. But moratoriums are just a stopgap measure, says Wolf, who anticipates a surge in disconnections across the U.S. Inflation is hitting people pretty hard, he says. Utilities are not set up to deal with the number of people who can't pay their bills. Hotter summers are heightening the risk that for some people, losing power will prove fatal. According to Indiana University's Energy Justice Lab, 41 states have some sort of protection against utility shutoffs during the winter, whereas only 19 have laws or regulations preventing disconnections in sweltering weather. On average, there were 188 heat-related deaths a year in the U.S. from 2017 through 2021, up an average of 81 in 5 years before that. Historically, state and regulators have focused on protecting customers during the cold winter months, but that will need to be re-examined, with climate change expected to create longer and more persistent heat waves, said David Koniski, co-director of the Energy Justice Lab. Rising temperatures are already boosting demand for electricity and raising utility bills. Here's a graph that says U.S.-related heat fatalities, 2014, certainly below 100. 2020, it spiked up to above 300. Shutoffs, after people fall behind on bills, will likely become worse in the coming years and decades, he says. It's higher prices, it's heat waves, and increasing needs for energy. witnessing it all happen in real time. The apocalyptic collapse is happening steadily. And what are we doing in order to transition away from this system? Not much. Not much. A small story here, a small story there. California is setting up solar panels that they likely buy from China at a tariff. In the UK, they're sending officers, this is from Anemone in the chat. In the UK, they're sending officers to people's homes over power bills I've seen on TikTok. Yeah. Bobbies to bash heads over late bills. People can't afford food, let alone their energy bills in the UK, but billionaires are sending cops, is the appropriate response. Not a rational way to handle such a situation. No human thinks that beating poor people up is appropriate when they can't pay their bills. Yeah. Yeah. Like, what's the crime here? These corps could very easily say we don't need any more profits and just let people have energy. There's nothing stopping them. Well, and like, if we nationalized these systems, right? Because the big problem is that when you run at a loss like this, you can create some kind of negotiation, right? That there is like a negotiation that is happening with these energy companies now, when you're in a running at a loss sort of situation. But when you run at a positive, right? When you run at a surplus, all that wealth just goes into the coffers of the billionaire class, right? So if it was a nationalized system, if the system was nationalized, then you could simply say, yeah, we're going to run at a loss for now, and then when you run at a surplus, that money goes back into the treasury, right? That money goes back into the pockets of the people. And you could even create like funds specifically for this reason, right? You could have like, or we ran at a bit of a surplus, and so that means we've got a bit of a storage, right? And now we need to run at a bit of a deficit, so you could have like an ebb and flow. But the system of extraction doesn't permit that to happen, and ultimately, like, it is a system of extraction that will lead to abandonment. That the billionaire class is willing to negotiate so long as they feel that their supremacy, their dominance, their ownership of the system is secured. And should they, should that be threatened, right? Should that become threatened, then there's a lot of things that they will do, right? We saw that with FDR. We know that the capitalist class will capitulate a lot if it means they get to keep control of the system, which I don't think they should. Like, straight up, these companies should be nationalized. That the private ownership of these companies is not beneficial. That it is a negative attribute in all cases. That it's a bad idea to let private owners own utilities and own this kind of stuff, because they're just going to extort people, right? That's how this goes. Like, this is going to result in, and it is already resulting across Europe, into a human rights crisis, right? This is turning into a catastrophe. That electricity is going to be shut off. And where is it going to get shut off, of course, is in where the poor live, right? That the poor are going to be abandoned, right, into the sweltering heat. And it does kind of show you how clueless the ownership class actually is. Like, if you shut the power off on the poor, they're not going to be able to do anything other than organize against you, right? They're not going to watch Netflix. They're not going to have their little snackies. They're not going to have... You're turning off the circus if you do that. And so the only option they have left is to gather together, cry into their cups, and organize against you. So this is just like a clear-cut case of capitalism plotting its own demise, right? That... Oh my goodness. What is up, buddy? I know Milo doesn't like to hear that electricity can get shut off on people, which I can respect. Isn't that right, Milo? It's a real shame. It's a real shame that electricity gets shut off on people, isn't it, bud? It's hard to believe, and it's hard to imagine. that we say that we live in this like great wealthy society, right? We're the greatest country in the world, all that kind of stuff. And yet we're shutting electricity off on people. But I mean, we're a country that doesn't provide clean drinking water to all the citizens, right? We're a country that says people in Flint, Michigan, right, should not have clean drinking water. So we're fairly selective, it seems. That's the saddest whine I've heard from Milo. Ligandy's good to see you. He's just being he just wants attention. That's all. He's looking at me with that kind of look of like, John, who are you even talking to? Who am I even talking to? Right? Well, I'm talking to you. Concerned citizens, fellow Dadaists, especially today with the Dadaism. I'm seeing a lot of that. I feel like absurdism has taken over, which I can respect. It is absurd times. It is absurd times. Starbucks, creating a culture of fear. Oh, before we move on from this, insert ad. Sorry about that. Could you turn up your mic gain a bit? I think I just move it a bit closer. That'll probably help. Dadaism. Dadaism is a movement that happened post World War One, and occurred across Europe. It is an art movement that fundamentally said any culture that produces the horrors of a world war akin to World War One is a culture that needs to be washed away, that is not worth keeping. And their opinion was that the way to confront the culture of imperialism and the culture of capitalism was through absurdism, specifically absurdism for the sake of absurdism, thereby taking things that are considered sacred and taking things that are considered sacred and rendering them absurd. And through rendering them absurd, much like our chat is currently, desacralize certain figures. So you'll see like the perfect example of Dadaism would be like the cartoons in Monty Python's work, right? Like Monty Python's Search for the Holy Grail, like just absurdism for the sake of absurdism. That the Queen, presidents, religious figures, the Pope, are often the ire and are often in the target of Dadaists. And one of the famous acts that the Dadaists did is one of them got enough prominence. I believe this happened in Zurich. Got enough prominence so that he could display some of his work. They asked him to come and display some of his work. And he showed up with a urinal and installed the urinal. And of course people said, it's a urinal, what have you done? And his response, of course, was, well, why is this not considered art? Someone worked on it, someone put their life into it, they made decisions on it, and of course, and I would in fact argue that it is better than most art pieces, because at least this serves a purpose. At least this has a job that it achieves in the society. And perhaps we should think of it not only on those terms, but also in artistic terms, and its artistic value as well. And that's why whenever you go to like any large museum or gallery of any sort, you'll find that somewhere there will be a urinal installed somewhere to act as a way to kind of say, maybe we're all taking the piss, right? Maybe this shouldn't be taken so seriously. And you can't piss on the Mona Lisa or the museum staff gets angry. That's true, CR Strifey. That's true. You're okay, buddy. You're okay. I know, right? World War I, it was so bad that it kicked off an absurdist artistic movement, and they liked it so much they did it again. Like, that's what's crazy about World War II, man. Like, as if World War I wasn't bad enough, they had to do it again. It's fairly incredible. So I hope that's an explanation. And the reason why I think Dadaism is important for us to know is that we're already seeing a Dadaist movement. Gen Z especially. Like, there's a bit of it in the millennials. There's a little bit of Dadaism, but Gen Z is going to go full Dadaist. Just absurdist for absurdism's sake. You can see it in a lot of the meme culture. You can see it in a lot of the ways that memes are developed and produced. That they're absurd. Like SpongeBob SquarePants is very Dadaist in a lot of its presentation. Absurdism for the sake of absurdism. Yeah, a lot of memes walk the line. Good to see you, Methane. Good to see you. Yep. Who doesn't love SpongeBob, right? Who doesn't love SpongeBob? And so, hopefully that explanation helped you out. Starbucks is creating a culture of fear as it fires dozens involved in union efforts. It really is getting to the point where Starbucks is just not even going to pretend anymore, right? And a lot of these corporations are just not even going to pretend anymore, right? 1 second, guys. Milo, come along. Milo in space. Milo in space. Here's a good point. And we're starting to see this manifest itself with the Amazon strikes and all of this kind of stuff. This is getting a bit on the nose, frankly, where it's just outright firing people now, right? It's just saying outright, like, oh, you're trying to unionize? Well, we'll get rid of you. More than 85 workers at Starbucks who are heavily involved in union organization efforts at giant coffee chain has been fired over the past several months, according to the workers group Starbucks Workers United. Workers have filed numerous unfair labor practice charges over the firings, and a federal judge recently ordered the reinstatement of 7 workers in Memphis, Tennessee, who were fired in February, a ruling Starbucks has said it disagrees with and intends to appeal. Man, giving billions of dollars to, like, single individuals, right? What a great idea that was, right? It's really encouraged, like, the best of our society to come out and be the best they could possibly be, right? Like, that's the most fucked up thing about all of this, is that nobody wants to be ruled by a king, right? Everybody would say, like, yeah, no, obviously, like, you can't allow power to accrue under such a small group, right? Like, a single individual cannot have this kind of power, just straight up. And I think that even the far right libertarians would be like, yeah, you can't allow power to accrue under a single individual like this. But for whatever reason, as long as it's financial power, that seems perfectly fine. That a single individual can have like $800 billion or like $1 trillion. It doesn't matter. There is no number that you can say. It can be sky's the limit, right? Like someone like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk has more power than pharaohs, has more power than fucking kings and shit, right? And we're just pretending like that's not the case, right? Like you talk to these guys who are like, the government's the problem. That's why we need to have these checks and these balances, right? You have the presidency, you got the Congress, you got the Senate, you got the Supreme Court, and it's all a series of checks and balances that check and balance each other. But it's totally fine if that guy has $1 trillion. He certainly won't buy that system. That won't ever happen, ever. Right? Like that's what's causing the problem. That there are trillionaires in the conversation. And when people attempt to organize, even by the rules instated by the fucking billionaire class, this is what's happening. Right? That following the rules doesn't seem to be a winning strategy. It doesn't seem to actually result in benefits for people, right? That I think it was a United States president of some note that said those who make reformation impossible make revolution inevitable. Hey Tinker, how you doing? Hey John, hope you're feeling better today. Not really, honestly, Tinker. I feel very burnt out. And I'm starting to recognize that I'm not alone in this. And feel like I've been talking to lots of people. And we've even got some people in the chat who are convincing me that they're a little burnt out themselves. A little bit of absurdist Dadaism happening in the chat right now, which I don't mind. Just to be clear, like, and let's name names, John and Conton. It's you two, especially. Just because I'm not engaging directly doesn't mean I'm not enjoying it. You guys are quite lovely, in fact. And I do think that, I mean, the summer heat, I think, is getting to people. I think there's a lot of that going on. That's definitely affecting. But also, like, we're all going through this incredible grind, eh? Like this is a grind that like medieval peasants didn't have to deal with. This is like some next level shit, right? This is some next level shit. Nope, we have not done Mr. Lynch, so let's do Mr. Lynch. One of these days I will. What the hell am I doing? One of these days I will actually set a time for this. We got 12 people watching according to YouTube. So let's see those numbers, everybody. Christopher De Silva, good to see you, bud.
Here we go for today's number.
It's
August 25, 2022.
We got 2 8s, a 4, a 6, a 7.
Each ball has a number.
I'm going to go with a 1. I'm going with a 1. Swirl the numbers. A lot of 4s. Hope it's a 4. You know what? It's going to be a 4. I'm sticking with 1, but it's going to be a 4. 10. Somebody called it. DM. DM, man, you are easily and far away the most winningest person in the chat, I think. Your number gets called more than anybody else. For sure. Ding, 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 ding. You win. You walk away. And weren't you the one that suggested it? I don't know, dude. Yeah, pre-watcher. Seems a bit pre-watchy. Weren't you the one that suggested it? DM? Huh? You're a mean one, Mr. Lynch. Do. Oh, methane. Oh, I tried looking into David Thompson's net worth yesterday, and it's crazy the disparity between Wiki, Forbes, and other sources ranges from like 8 billion to 54 billion, and I don't think the reason was old news. Yeah, four is half of 10. That's right. Yeah, like why would a person like David Thompson want you to know, like what his actual value is, right? Like. The more you learn about it, the more you see, like, they're all trying to obfuscate this of one another, all the time, constantly. Like, they don't want you to know. They want to keep that under their hats. David Thompson is very smart and private. He spends half his time in London, UK. Yeah, dude. Why would you ever, like, if I had the type of money that a man like David Thompson has, I would live in a very private, secluded place, right? That was very difficult to get to. I would ensure that I had like a good security team, right? To make sure that nobody comes in and fucks around, right? I would keep my name out of the news. No one would know I exist, right? I would always just keep everything on the down low as often as I possibly can. Yeah. He lives in Rosedale. Yeah. Like, you can go to his place, right? I suggest you don't, because that'll cause you problems. But but he's done a very good job of, he probably has a bat cave. Yeah, or what is that called? Where they have like a vault that they run into, like a dead man's thing, something like that. Wasn't David Compton an anchorman for CBC News back in the 80s? I don't know who David Compton is. We're talking about David Thompson. Unions just mean employees actually have the chance to learn how screwed they really are. Yeah, better to keep employees competing with each other, weary of one another. Yes, a panic room, that's what it is. Man, imagine having like an entire room that's just dedicated to you locking yourself in it. Right? Like, that's how you know you've really made it, I think. That if not only do you feel you need this room, but you actually have the space and the wealth to do it, right? Jodie Foster, Panic Room, yeah. Good old Jodie Foster, always delivering. Yeah, hey guys, have you noticed there's a water crisis? Why do we still have lawns? This is a question I keep asking. You know, all of these lawns could be transferred into gardens. It would be easy to do. Like, hey, how do we take all of these unemployed people and give them a job, right? To provide them with some kind of wealth while also meeting the multiple crises that exist, right? Well, lawns still somehow. The planet has accelerated its revolt against us, and still we tend our lawns. One part of Earth we can control. Society falters, resources dwindle, and still, lawns. Lawns, burned out, blonde and dead in the air fryer of August. Lawns, emerald green, no, alien green, and kept that way by a maniacal vigilance and an elaborate system of pipes and potions, organic and otherwise, in defiance of an ecology. And for what? To have in this chaos dominion over something? Lawn and order? To drape a veil of verdancy over the world gone to seed? To feel superior or equal to Ron across the street whose lawn always looks like the 18th at Pebble Beach? We've been sweeping our anxieties under these green comfort blankets for quite some time. A smooth, closely shaven surface of grass is by far the most essential element of beauty on the grounds of a suburban home, wrote Frank J. Scott in 1870. Around the time of the first lawnmower patent, in a book titled The Art of Beautifying Suburban Home Grounds of Small Extent. For setting off both the house and landscape, planting a good lawn is of vital importance, declared a caption in the New York Times in 1937. Around that time, during the Great Depression, the Mattei family in Cincinnati did not have a lawn. They had a yard, and the yard was functional. It was for chickens and tomato plants. It was not for grass. One of the Matteis, Vic, used the GI Bill to get to graduate school and become a research scientist. He made a family of his own in the Philadelphia suburb of Cinnaminson, New Jersey, in a subdivision that paved over Quaker farmland to accommodate Americans who were tinkering with the Aegis radar system for the nearby RCA Corps. Everyone in the subdivision had a lawn, of course. What was the American dream in the 20th century if it wasn't aproned by a quarter acre of Kentucky bluegrass or tall fescue, which is a good for recreation and admiration, and not much else. Vic had some token vegetable plants on the property, but the yard was not for survival. The yard was for lawn. The lawn was for mowing. He was mowing the lawn every Saturday, says Vic's daughter, Etta Marie Mattei, and that was success. Having the lawn, mowing the lawn. That was the 1970s. It is now a half century later, specifically Friday, August 12th, 2022. Mattei, a landscape designer, is standing on a lawn in a leafy crook of Bethesda. She is talking to the owner of the lawn about getting rid of it. It contributes nothing, says MJ Veverka about her lawn, which she's watered and weeded and mowed for 31 years. And for what? The lawn is static, non-functional, tedious. Last year, Veverka filled in her backyard pool, removed the surrounding lawn, and enlisted Mattei's company to turn the space into an oasis of native plants. A homegrown national park, in the words of a grassroots movement for regenerating biodiversity. Veverka so loves the backyard, which is now an evolving work of horticultural art and a functioning component of the surrounding ecosystem, that she wants to do the same thing with her front yard. Step 1. Get thee gone, lawn. Mattei used to spend more time educating clients about the benefits of turf removal and native plantings in the past 2 years, for whatever reason. New clients have started coming to her with those very ideas. Maybe quarantine amplified the sameness of lawns. Maybe in this climate-conscious era, we are thinking outside the strict geometry of the lawn, which Mattei describes as ecologically dead, a monoculture in a world that needs biodiversity. Over a century, from around the 1870s to the 1970s, Americans slowly fell in love with lawns. Lawns were a sign of taste, calm, power, privilege, order, discipline, especially in the aftermath of World War II. On the American front lawn, men used power machinery and chemicals, the tools of war, to engage in a battle for supremacy with Mother Nature, writes Virginia Scott Jenkins in her book, The Lawn, A History of an American Obsession. Over the past 50 years, we've slowly fallen out of love with lawns. They began to signal waste, disregard, disharmony, homogeneity, gentrification, zombie boomerism. Wasn't there something a bit decadent about millions of Americans applying millions of pounds of fertilizer and pouring millions of gallons of water on the ground to grow something you couldn't eat unless you were a Jersey cow? Columnist Ellen Goodman wrote in the Boston Globe all the way back in 1977. Wasn't there something bizarre about their spending millions of gallons to cut it off? I think we're growing up as a country, Mattei says. For a lot of American history, it seemed like we had boundless access to land, and we kept extracting from it and building on it. I see a real change from looking at land as a demonstration of power or success to looking at land as a precious resource. She adds, when we are lawn people, we are one thing. When we are not lawn people, we are another thing. We are still, largely, lawn people. The biggest crop by area in the United States, not corn, not soybean, but lawn. Unproductive, ornamental lawn. Around 40 million acres of it, or 2% of the land area of the lower 48, according to the multiple estimates cited by Garrick Gutman, program manager for NASA's Land Cover Land Use Change program. 40 million acres. The entire state of Georgia couldn't contain America's total lawnage. And we pour 9 billion gallons of water on landscaping every day, according to Environmental Protection Agency. Meanwhile, the southwest United States is enduring a mega drought. The past 2 decades constitute its driest period since the year 800. California Governor Gavin Newsom declared a drought state of emergency in October. In a world thirsty for water, lawns are a sneaky siphon. These days we have No Mow May, where neighbors test each other's tolerance for nonconformity. We have Twitter users sharing before and after photos of their war on lawns, which turn flat slabs of sickly green into colorful kingdoms of billowing flora. We have a channel on Reddit called No Lawns, and TikTok's hashtags such as hashtag anti-lawn, which might direct you to a performance of a profane anti-lawn song by a 27-year-old Nashville musician named Mel Bryant. At the time, all of my neighbors were obsessed with their lawns, says Bryant, who wrote the song on Earth Day 2020. Everyone was mowing constantly, every day. At any point in time, you'd hear lawn mowers going, and it drove me fricking insane. I still have this one neighbor who, I swear, on the 4th of July, he was mowing at 7:30 p.m. What are you doing, dude? This can wait. Bryant's song racked up tens of thousands of views, spreading through TikTok's hashtag cottagecore hashtag, where the younger people advertise their cozy, quaint, sustainable, back-to-nature ethos. Everyone's got the perfect lawn, Bryant says of her street, in the Rosebank area of Nashville. They seed their lawns, they have sprinklers and shit, and I think it's attached to a more old-school boomer generation of the idea of what an American life is. And our lawn, well, Bryant has let it grow wild. I do think it's pretty generational. I've definitely noticed in the past few years that so many people around my age are getting into gardening and taking their lawns and turning them into gardens. Walt Whitman wrote of grass in 1855. I guess it must be the flag of my disposition, out of the hopeful green stuff woven. Said Hank Hill, fictional Texas propane salesman in 1997. Look, some people hoist a flag to show they love our country. Well, my lawn is my flag. But lawn has become a liability, or in some cases an asset, on the condition of its removal. California's main water utility is paying customers between $2 and $5 for each square foot of living turf that they remove. Last year, Nevada outlawed certain types of lawn. Rather, the state legislature prohibited the use of water from the dribbling Colorado River to feed certain types of non-functional turf, which in southern Nevada slurps up to 12 billion gallons of water every year, more than 10% of the state's usage of the river. The lawn created a committee to sort functional turf from non-functional. Discussions were had about how to categorize pet relief areas and wedding lawns at golf courses. Before the law passed, Sun City Anthem, an active adult community in Henderson, Nevada, had already removed almost 40,000 square feet of grass, which nearly halved its water bill. Larry Fosen, facility manager and landscape supervisor, replaced the lawn with xeriscaping, native plants like lantana cactuses, Mexican feather grass. Last year on the property, Fosen saw something he'd never seen before in Nevada. Monarch butterflies, about 25 of them, migrating through. There's flowers, color, butterflies, hummingbirds, Fosen says of lawnless living. Different parts of the day you see different things. We have boulders so people can sit and be part of the landscape. When we had grass, people just walked into the building, but now they'll stop and ooh and ah. Landscaping is meant to be interactive. It's meant to be part of your life. Lawns, of course, are part of your life. You throw a football on them, you picnic on them, you lean and loaf on them. Some years ago, Dave Markinark penned a polite defense of lawns on his landscape company's blog. Why the anti-lawn movement bugs me a little. Turf serves a purpose, he wrote. It's soft and durable for recreation. It provides visual relief for the eye and contrast for landscaping. Markiniak welcomes changing landscaping tastes, but notes that they are changing slowly. As much as Americans like to call themselves rugged individuals, there's a lot of looking around to see what other people are doing, said Markinark, who lives in Culpeper. I explain to people advocating anti-lawn, look, it's not going to happen overnight. If you want to get people away from lawns, you have to show them it can be beautiful. It can be desirable. And perhaps, most importantly, it can make the neighbors jealous. What a note to end on, eh? That at the end of the day, it is just all about keeping up with the Joneses. It's just all about what your neighbors are doing. Hank Hill write this? We even have a Hank Hill reference. Yeah, grow food, right? Grow food. What are you, a third world country? Yeah, thanks, Ligon Dudes. I live next door to a lawn Nazi. Oh dear. It was always so sad to me, people growing old, spending their time tending a lawn and landscape that's absolutely useless. Yeah, useless people doing useless things, right? In California, they have the worst drought in their history. Rich people don't care. Authorities gave out fines, which is nothing for them. Yeah, I think prison time should change their minds. I'm of that opinion too. Stop with this fining nonsense, right? Like, stop with this fining nonsense. They don't care about the fines. The fines don't matter. If you have $100 million, right, the fines don't matter. It's completely irrelevant to you. Like, unless the fine is for $100 million, right? Yeah, get thee gone, Lon. I think more of you for pointing out the class issue above all else. Well, of course, a box. That's what we do here. That's what we do here. We point out the class issue, right? That's what we're for. That's what we're doing constantly. I love this picture, by the way, right? This idea of the lawn, right? Which is, you know, beautifully cut and all of this, but it's also binding up, right? That it's capturing the person within it. And it is a very boomer mentality, right? It's got this very boomer kind of ethos about it. And you are to be, I know when I was growing up, right? Like I had lawns, we had lawns all over the place, and tending the lawn was one of honestly, I enjoyed doing it. I've got to be straight with you. I enjoyed tending the lawn. You know Hank Hill, right? Hank, he has this real love of tending his lawn, and there's this whole, they did entire episodes of King of the Hill on this idea of him tending his lawn and all of this. Yeah, absolutely. I completely get it. I remember when I was out on the East Coast, I was living in a house and we had to tend the lawn. That was part of the deal, and I loved doing it. I was like, absolutely, give me access to a lawnmower. Let's go. I did landscaping, all this kind of stuff. So I get it. Like, I get that aspect of it. It's a way to send into the world, like, look how put together I am. Look how well I look, right? And if you would go by someone else's lawn and they would have let it grown in a little bit or something would have happened, and you could judge them for it. You could think less of them for it. You do a little like, and that this article essentially ends with that, right? It essentially ends with this idea of like, the lawn needs to look good. It needs to look like you've done it on purpose, right? And frankly, I think that the biggest reason why lawns are like this is that we have this kind of judgment of one another. This kind of like, oh, it's got to look beautiful. It's got to be put together. It's got to have that kind of thing going on about it. And this is simply the easiest way to do it, right? This is simply the easiest way to do it. That just get the grass, cut it clean, like all of that takes the less amount of time. It looks good. You're set, right? Gardens are messy. Gardens are messy affairs, and people just don't want to be the first person to receive the ire of the community, right? And like, I remember growing up, there was this one place where he had taken up the lawn and had put in like a beautiful sort of stone infrastructure, and it was because he was allergic or had allergies or something like this, and so couldn't tend a lawn in that way, and so everybody, you'd drive by it, and every single time someone would comment on it, right? That here's the oddball, and everybody understood, so the judgment was tempered a bit, right? But you couldn't get away from it, right? You couldn't get away from it. Methane says, I read an actual good article in the CBC recently, I think it's good anyway, about how to get free milkweed seeds for monarch butterfly caterpillars. Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. dude, we could be doing so much cool shit in cities. Like, cities could be loaded with gardens. Gardens could be everywhere. Like literally, the city could hire people, right? Oh, we've got unemployed people. Oh my God, there's this whole crisis. Oh, what do we do? Right? Oh, there's homeless people. What do we do with them? All that kind of stuff. You literally can create a make work program, right? You can create a make work program, sending people around to houses and tending gardens. That's what you could do, right? You could just make sure that the gardens are well taken care of and well tended, and of course the people living there can have access to it as well. And like this is in my view, like, and we could have hives all over the place, right? We could have hives all over the place. I think having beehives all over the place, just pollinating these beautiful gardens that we could have all throughout our cities. Like, my ex, she tore up her front yard. She's planted a garden, and she says that when people walk by, they celebrate it with her. That nobody's walking by with the judgment that I think people are anticipating or any of that kind of stuff. And to me, it would be like a surefire way to improve our communities and improve our cultures almost immediately. And it would actually not be that difficult to do, right? It just seems like we're so hung up on it. And C.R. Strifey, I think, got a good point here. Keeping a perfect lawn is the boomer equivalent of gaming, right? It does kind of have that aspect of it. It's a hobby, right? But and I sort of think to myself, well, if that's the truth, right, then why can't that extend into gardening as well? Why is it that it's just got to be the lawn, right? Why can't it also extend into a garden? And I do think that there is the simple, and I think it is a class issue of, oh, look at me, I have this land, and obviously I can tend it, and I can take care of it, and I choose not to produce food out of it. I've got the land, and I'm using it as an ornament. I'm not using it to produce food. And I think that comes with it, this sort of sense of superiority, right? This sort of sense of look at how much better we are, and how rich we are, and well off. We don't need to grow our own food. We've gotten away from that. We're a civilized culture now, right? We don't need to plant gardens anymore. Methane says, what I find ridiculous, I think there are some places, maybe like Nevada, California, that have strange laws, like you can't collect rainwater or store it or something. Yeah, golf courses are fine though. Oh, dude, we could rip golf courses right up. Golf courses should just not exist. They just shouldn't. Like, the idea that there are these huge swaths of tended land that we use so some rich cocksuckers can, like, knock a ball around. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, it's the stupidest game. It's the stupidest game. I completely agree with Mark Twain, right? Golf is a good walk ruined. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. Look, I just don't, like, who cares? You want to play golf? Like, you don't want any stings? Bees are not going to sting you. Like, this is the thing that people, like, you think bees, and also, by the way, P.S., get stung. Like, get stung. Do you know what happened to me as a beekeeper, right? When I was a beekeeper, I got to the point where these bees, they would sting me, and I would just be like, yeah. Like, that's it. It was like somebody coming up to me and just, like, pinching me. People who do not interact with nature on the regular get absolutely hysterical about nature. Like, bee stings are not a big deal, right? They really aren't. Like, yeah, maybe you'll experience some swelling. And I mean, if you're allergic, fine. But that's a whole other story. But, like, a bee sting is not the worst thing that's ever going to happen to you. And the true reality of it is that bees, they're not incentivized to sting you. They don't want to. right? It causes them problems to do so. And so, more or less, they're just going to leave you alone. And that's what's so... Yeah, bee stings are just as harmless as getting bird poop on your hat, right? Like, it is of that kind of level, right? And it's just the difference is that having beehives in your city improves the quality of everything. Bees improve everything all the time, constantly. That's all they do. That bees are so much more valuable than humans. Like, bees pollinate everything. They make vegetable gardens and fruit gardens produce more. They make flowers bloom brighter, stronger, right? They and then also they produce honey. They're just better. They're just better. Yeah, golf. Switch to croquet. I don't know, dude. Like, just go hiking. Go hiking and take a little stick and hit a rock down the path. That's how golf probably started, by the way. That they were just like walking, and while they were walking, they had a stick and they were just hitting a ball or hitting a rock, right? And then eventually, like, some of the paths that they were taking, they did enough that they became like traditional, right? And then some rich cocksucker comes along, charges a fee, right? They get like an actual, instead of just like a wooden stick, right? They craft one out of metal or whatever, and they pretend like this is the shit. And then a game that probably used to actually be just like a guy walking, going like the equivalent of kicking a rock with your shoe, right? That's probably what was happening. So the guy was walking, and then instead of hitting it with his shoe, he hit it with a stick, right? And then so instead of the walk being about the walk and hitting it, it became about hitting the thing, right? That it doesn't take a genius to figure out what men are going to do, right? They're going to be like, well, how many times did you hit the rock to get it in the hole? Well, I hit it 56 times. 56? I think that I could do it in less than that. Well, if you think you can do it in less than that, Seamus, you go ahead and you do that. Well, I did then, didn't I? I did it in 55. Well, I think I can do it in less than 55. Right? That's absolutely how this happened. And then eventually, there like along came some probably hotshot young asshole who was like, "You old guard, you're all just walking and hitting the stick. I'm gonna stand there and really line up the shot, give it a big whack, and I think I can put the rock in the hole in 10 shots." 100%. Exactly how this happened. And then eventually they like started putting obstacles in the way and doing all kinds of and like grooming it. The grooming, right? Because they didn't have anything fucking better to do. And instead of like improving the environment and making the place better, they like built this fucking golf course so that rich cocksuckers could play this stupid game. Some people are violently allergic, but yeah, I can't remember the last time I was stung. I always got stung by hornets, though. Yeah, hornets are a different beast, man. Hornets are evil. Like, you want to talk about, like, the worst pairing ever? Like, if I was a bee, if I was a honeybee, I would be super pissed off by hornets. Hornets are just, like, absolutely ruining the game for honeybees. Right? Honeybees are just like bouncing around being like, I'm a little bee, pollinating everything, making everything really nice. And then here come these fucking hornets being like, well, hornets, get fucked. And everybody mistakes honeybees for hornets. I'd be so mad. I'd be so mad. Yeah. Would anyone miss hornets if they disappeared one day? Yeah, exactly. Hornets are like the proof positive that like nature just generates shit. You know, there's no reason for hornets to exist. They simply exist because they can. And they're just evil little bastards. I wasn't really trying to do the accent, Methane. That's why I was just doing an accent. I'm better at the Irish than the Scottish. I wasn't really trying to pick one, though. So I kind of ended up doing both. It's fine. Yeah, wasps are worse. Yeah, those white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, look at these. You're absolutely right. Nothing's worse than a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, for sure. If I was a honeybee, I'd be super pissed off by that, too. And if I was a wasp, I'd also be super pissed off by that. All right. That was a fun little diversion. Lawns and lawn culture. I sell propane and propane accessories. All right. Canada's inflation revisions show something is really wrong, says the National Bank. This is from Better Dwelling. Canada's headline inflation is falling, but core inflation, the central bank's preferred measure, is still climbing. That was the focus of a research note from National Bank of Canada last week in response to July inflation data. Core inflation, considered a more stable measure, climbed to a 3-decade high. Even more surprising, this year's numbers have been revised 3 times, meaning this measure isn't as stable as the central bank believed it was. Canadian inflation is rising retroactively as revisions stack up. NBF found the average of the 3 core measures continued to rise in July. The rate reached 5.3% in its highest it's been in over 32 years. The sudden boost was so large due to a significant revisions to previous data. Here's your lines, right? If you like lines, right? To the moon, Alice. The bank points to January 2022 data that was originally reported at a fairly robust 2.3% in the February report. Last month, StatCan revised January's core inflation to 3.2%, adding nearly a full point. The fund didn't stop there. In August, released January 2022 was revised once again to 3.6%, more than a point higher than originally reported. So, basically what this article is telling you is that what's being reported, well, give it 6 months and they'll revise it, and when they revise it, it'll likely revise upwards. Right? Look at this crazy fucking bullshit, guys. Can I pull this up? Yeah. Historical revisions. So the the blue line is the original data. The red line is the revision, and then the gray line here is the secondary revision. These are pretty significant shifts and significant changes. Just wow, that headline. Canada, there's something wrong with CPI common? Or, yeah. If the monetary system is based almost entirely on inflation targeting, how it's measured requires much more public discussion. Honestly, I am more or less of the opinion that they're going to obscure the data on purpose, right? They want to. They don't want people to know how bad they're getting fucked. They don't want people to know exactly how bad things are, right? I love that they got a Bezos quote in here. Bezos once explained this issue very concisely. When the anecdotes and the data disagree, the anecdotes are usually right. There's something wrong with the way you are measuring it. Yeah, the euro is dropping. Well, I mean, the euro is going, the European Union is going into a tailspin. This winter is going to be absolutely brutal for Europe. People are going to go cold. People are going to freeze to death. That's how bad it's going to get in Europe. That they have bungled this whole situation with instigating this war with Russia, and it's blowing back on them extremely. You're seeing extreme blowback from all of this. And so, of course, the euro is dropping in value. Nobody gives a shit about it anymore. Nobody wants euros. Right? Nobody cares. How excited are you to go and invest in Europe right as they're hitting this enormous crisis, right? So you see a drop in investor confidence. Yeah, the sanctions have backfired. The whole thing has backfired. the whole thing has backfired. And the USD is even going to start going down. Right? The USD is going to start going down. Right? Because as the USD, like, the US is going to experience the same thing that Europe's experiencing. Yeah, Russia announced they need to raise 130,000 more forces in the military. Yeah, Putin signed legislation, right? That's all sort of back-end kind of stuff. Don't be too surprised to see, like, a big increase, something along the lines of, like, a GI Bill. Like, the Russians are going to really incentivize raising those sorts of troops. I think they hoped to not, but now they're looking at the long-term plan. And I am more or less of the opinion that the reason why Russia is doing that is not for the... No, this is just it, Tinker. I was just about to say. I don't think that Russia is raising those troops for a offensive push into Ukraine. I don't think that's what they're doing. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And you can click this and let everybody know that I was wrong. I don't think that what Russia is doing is raising more troops to push forward in an offensive. Like, those troops are not going to be ready for several years, right? It takes a long time to bring in people, train them, get them proficient, and get them battle ready. Like, you're putting weapons into these people's hands. Like, you can't just, welcome aboard, son, in you go, right? What for sure is happening? I actually think that Putin is doing this because he feels he's won the war, right? That what the Russians are doing now is not engaging in an offensive war. They're cleaning up. That's what's happening now. That if it was up to the Russians, they would just be like, look, we're just dusting up here. Can we call it? Right? It's like what if you're playing a game of baseball, right? You're playing a game of baseball, and the score is 30-1 in the sixth inning, right? Like, yeah, it's 30-1 in the sixth inning. And you're kind of looking at the other team, being like, "You want to call it?" And the other team goes, "No, we can still win. We can still do it. We can do it." And so you just got to play it through, and they don't have another option. He may have won the battle, not the war. Yeah. Well, because what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen is that they're going to continue dusting up the and cleaning this situation up. Here, you guys know how much I love to do this. Google Maps, Google Maps, Google Maps. We love Google Maps. Google Maps. Okay. Like, they're claiming this territory. They've already claimed this territory, right? They're creating administrative power in the Donbass. That, as far as the Russians are concerned, this is already going to be an independent state. Yeah, Igor Strelkov says Putin making same mistake as Stalin. Which one? Stalin made some mistakes, right? Can you be a bit more specific in that? But what I think is happening is that they're going to create administrative power here. And I think that what Putin is doing is anticipating what I have been saying all along of Ukraine. That Ukraine is going to continue moving to the right and is going to become more and more explicitly Nazi. That because it can't do anything else. Because the structure, like the scary things that have happened in Ukraine over the course of this war, right? The Russians are reporting on, and they're seeing very clearly, right? When Zelensky bans political opposition on the left, even liberals, including the official opposition parties, right? That is not insignificant. Not insignificant. You've brought this up before, Tinker. NATO going to bring in long-range missiles that can hit Moscow and St. Petersburg from Finland and Ukraine. I mean, that's essentially just the end of the world. Like, if NATO does that, then they've just gone psychotic and they've just lost their minds completely. Like, we're essentially just ruled, like, I say we're ruled by psychopaths, and they're just, like, tipping their hand, right? That's not Russia losing the war. That's the planet being incinerated. Like, what you're saying there. Like, if that's what happens, it's over for humanity. It's done. That the earth will cook. We will all burn to death in a fiery inferno. Nobody wins that. What you're saying here. NATO brings in long-range missiles that can hit Moscow and St. Petersburg from Finland and Ukraine. Okay, it's nuclear war then. Like, that's what it is. That nobody wins that. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly concerning. Nuclear war is certainly concerning, without a doubt. Like, and if that's the way it goes, if that's the way it escalates, if our psychopathic leadership decides to incinerate the entire planet, right? Like, that's it. There's no negotiative power, right? Like, to deal with that kind of level of narcissistic psychopathy, right? Like, if they start using the nukes, by the way, then it's just full-blown fascism. Like, expect to see people like me just completely censored and silenced if that starts to happen. If they're willing to go nuclear, then they can't have people like me on their airwaves. So expect to see just like a full collapse into overt fascism. Overt fascism. Yeah, everybody's got underground shelters and bunkers. So what? People are gonna... I can't imagine a worse fate. I gotta tell you. Just like living in one of these underground bunkers, like, I would probably just commit suicide. Frankly. Like, oh, the earth is a hellstorm. Just absolutely just a demonic, like, evil, irradiated, hellish place. Yeah, I'm gonna spend my life living under... No. Like, fuck no. Like, absolutely not. I just think that path lies devastation, war, violence, and madness. Like, it's just going to be brutal. You're going to have, like, internal civil wars in these underground bunkers where people just, like, fight all the time. John, what if there's a beautiful lady with you? If it's just me and the beautiful lady, we're in like an Adam and Eve scenario. How big a bitch is she? Nope. No, man. It's madness. It's madness. Like, I can tolerate a lot of solitary conditions. Like, I'm a very solitary sort of a person. Right? So I can take that for a while. Anyone is going to go mad. Like, it's madness what's going to happen. And I feel like there's a very, like, romantic version of this. People kind of have a romanticized idea of, like, the bunker life. It's not going to be nice. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be hard, harsh, madness-inducing brutality. What happens? And yeah, I get married to her, put a baby in her, live happy ever after, never see the sun. Right? We'll just raise a child. State-run bunkers full of malls. I just think it would collapse almost instantaneously. People aren't meant to live that way. They're just not. And so stepping away from this conversation of nuclear war, because if it goes to nukes, then that's it. We don't need to have a big conversation about it. Like, really. Like, if they decide to start dropping nukes, the ecosystem will destroy us. There's no strategic conversation to have. Right? There's no conversation about, like, well, if they get Warsaw and Berlin and then Moscow goes and then they can retreat to this position and they do all kinds of blah, blah. drop the map and the troops can go here and there's this region here, like, and none of that matters. None of that matters. We're already, like, one of my favorite graphs to point out for this conversation is I have so many bookmarks, too many bookmarks for John. I think is it, yeah. I love this one, right? So this is just the tracking data for the month of June, right? So just the month of June every year, here's what the temperature was like. And that's all this is, starting from like 1880. So starting from 1880, going all the way up to 2022, right? So, and there's something really important to see about this graph, and I'll pause it, right? There's big spikes. You see? See these big spikes in temperature? What do you think those were? 1951 is here, right? So you're looking at like the 40s. Oh, what happened in the 40s? What happened in the 40s, you guys? So this spiking temperature is the nukes. Look at what the nukes did, right? We had a cooling temperature, right? Or just sort of an average temperature that was underneath. Then 1951, and it's been, you can see temperature kind of going up, the nukes, right? And then they drop back down, right? You got more nuclear tests happening here. You got the Soviet Union participating in some of this, setting off their own bombs as well. And then by the time we're in the 80s, right, here comes the temperature, right? This is the fossil fuel effect, right? And now this is where we find ourselves. So, come on. I'm failing away. Failing away. I just want to pause it. There we go. This is where we find ourselves now. So, pointing it out, right, this is where we were, nukes. Then we kind of went back down a little bit, more nukes. Kind of went back down a little bit. And now, because of the CO2 effect, right, we're ramping it up. What happens if we drop nukes now? It's just the end of it. There's no need to have a big strategic conversation. That when people are talking about dropping nuclear armaments, they literally are saying, what if we just destroy the planet? What if we just destroy the species? That's literally what's being said. And it's literally what we should take from it. That the people who are walking around saying, oh, it can be done, it won't be so bad, are delusional. Should not be listened to. Literally, they might as well stand up and say, my opinion is no longer valid, I am incapable of rational discussion. Like, and there are a couple of voices who have stood up and said this that I no longer listen to. Kurtzig is a good one. Right, Kurtzig makes these fun little animations, right? These cute little things that is obviously being paid for now by Bill Gates. Recently released a video saying, like, nuclear war wouldn't be so bad, right? And it's all just delusional liberalism, right? Like, and so now 100%, like Kurtzig, you could just ignore him. He's not adding anything relevant to the conversation. Because if we drop nukes now, that's it. Game's over. Put it all back in the box. It's done. So we have to, if we are going to continue speaking rationally about what's happening in Ukraine, we have to simply talk about it as if it's not going to go nuclear. Speaking of going nuclear, here's the ad break. So, sorry about that. I hate doing it. I don't like to. Yeah, most of life will eventually starve after the firestorms. Yeah. The radiation and destruction, for one, doesn't even wipe out some cities. but all depends, I guess, what exactly happens. No, I mean, if you drop nukes, it's going to destroy. Oh, a Raytheon ad, excellently placed. I guess we are talking about war right now. Fucking Raytheon. No, if we drop a nuke now, it's totally done. Like, it is. It's totally fucking over. Like, so there's no. Oh, I thought that would have been really funny. That would have been really great. Anyway, and so there's no point talking about it, in my view. Like, if we're going to talk about what's happening on the world stage, we have to talk about it to keep the conversation sane and rational at all. We have to talk about it as if our leadership is capable of rational thinking and that they're not going to go nuclear, right? Like, we have to. Or because the alternative is basically, like, if, guys, straight up, man, like, if nukes start getting dropped and people still go to work the next day, like, what the fuck? I know I won't. I'm not going to work. I'm not serving this godforsaken satanic culture. If nukes start dropping, I'm gonna fucking walk into the wilderness. Like, I'm over. I'm done. Like, I'm not participating in any of this anymore. Like, we're basically saying, should we open the Hellgate? What do you guys think? You know, the Russians are getting pretty uppity in Ukraine. We should just open the Hellgate. That'll be fine. The demons will sweep through and destroy all that stands before it, but then we get one on the Russians. Like, no. No. I'm basically just, like, gonna go out in the street with a bell and start ringing it and just be like, let's go. Like, let's walk to City Hall and topple this thing. That's what I do immediately. I won't even think about it. Like, and I'm not gonna hide it. Like, you start dropping nukes, I'm going to be gathering people to overthrow. That's what I'm doing. Like, I'm not interested in tolerating a system that generates those outcomes. Right? Yeah, bell, placard, the end is nigh. Yeah, the whole thing. Might as well. I actually do think about making a shirt that just says on it, nigh. Right? Like, it's the only time anyone ever hears that word, right? So just, like, nigh. Yeah, if nukes are used, no more laws. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? Laws? What? I don't need to follow the laws of a demon. Like, what are you talking about? I don't need to follow the laws of a Voldemort. Like, I don't need to follow these fucking laws. Yeah, Westoids acting like China and Russia are the ones who would fire the first nukes when the regime is the psychopathic one. Well, what culture is the only culture that ever used nukes? What's the only culture that's ever used nukes on civilian targets? Was it Russia? Was it China? No, it was the United States on Japan twice. Right? Like, we know who's using the nukes in the scenario. We know how it's gonna go. Like, it's not a mystery. The Big Bad Orange Man has all the nuclear codes according to Hillary. Yeah. So stepping back from the nuclear conversation, because that path lies madness. Like, if nukes get used, there's no, you don't need to follow laws. There's no society. Like, these people are just outing themselves as overt, crazed, Nazi-level fascists if they start doing that. Like, you don't need to obey any of them. You don't need to pay any attention to any of them, except for the fact that they're armed, right? And psychopathically dangerous, right? Like, if you're still walking around with a gun on your hip, protecting that, then you're an enemy of humanity. Full stop. Like, if you're listening to this right now, and if you're a cop and a military man, if this society starts dropping nukes, and you do anything other than resign, you're an enemy of humanity. And the bad things that happen to you, I will smile and laugh at and report. You're an enemy of humanity. Full stop. So you, military and police forces, should be the first people saying, oh, hey, if we're actually interested in protecting law and order, maybe dropping nukes is the worst possible thing to do. Because there are people openly saying that their authority is now irrelevant. Like there's no such thing as authority figures in such a society. It doesn't exist anymore. There is only violence. Like that's the hard truth. That if a society is walking around dropping nuclear bombs, there is no law and order. There's nothing that has ever been put on page or paper that has relevance. There is only violence, exclusively. That the society has said might right makes right. That is it. So there is literally only what you can get away with. That is it. Full stop. No counter arguments. No counter arguments. Because it's always just, well, what? I nuked him. Doesn't matter. There's no law. There's no justifications. There's no philosophical debate. There's none of that. There's literally, I killed him first. I win. That's the extent of our discourse now. If we start dropping nukes. Because it's the second a nuke drops, it's full on survival mode. It is. Like I don't know why I hope I don't need to convince anybody of this. If a nuclear bomb goes off in our atmosphere right now, it is every man for themselves. Full stop. The abandonment culture will ramp right up. Feudalism will assert itself completely and totally. The police state will reinforce. People like me will be utterly silenced. Completely. Like, this channel won't survive that. This channel won't survive that. Like, it's a catastrophe upon a catastrophe upon a catastrophe. Like, it's not only the end of human civilization, it's likely the end of the species. And likely kicks the planet into a purging, a cleansing, right? It'll spend a couple of million years just scathing life off of this thing. And then it'll rebuild the way it does, right? Because the Earth's opinion of it will be like, oh, well, that was a mistake. Can't roll with that. Yeah, we came close with Zaporizhzhia, Ukraine. Yeah, and they've shut that plant down now. I saw an article recently. They've simply shut the plant down because of those events. Like, these people are Nazis. That's why it's a bad idea to arm Nazis the way we have. That's why it's a bad idea to train Nazis the way we have. Because Nazis are crazy. Like, they're crazed. They're like, they're literally, I shouldn't say literally, but they're as, like, they are people who have been inhabited by demons. That they have come into this plane of reality wearing human flesh, but with a demon in their soul. Like, I don't use the whole, like, well, their upbringing or any of that kind of stuff. There is such a thing as a psychopath. There is such a thing as a person who is just insane. That those people exist, they are real, and they are Nazis. Like, I don't think people should need to be convinced of this. And so to take a step back from the nuclear conversation, the reason why Putin is trying to create a larger military force and moving the culture into a more military kind of level is because he understands that after this conflict, there's another one coming. That the Ukrainians are also going to do that. That they are moving farther to the right. That there is a second conflict. that this was the first conflict. There will be a second conflict. And he knows it. Like, Putin's not a dumb guy. He knows it. And he knows that NATO is going to arm Ukraine more. He knows that weapons are going to keep going into this. He knows that there's going to be a secondary conflict. Right? And so he needs the troops to be able to do that. To be able to actually fight the secondary conflict. Because Ukraine is going full-blown Nazi. And it's happening in front of our eyes. Like, day by day, new things keep happening in Ukraine that make me go, yep, that's a Nazi state, all right. Yep. Like, you can make the argument now that, like, oh, it's pretty low. You know, they only have 2 seats in parliament, but there's only one trajectory. Like, you can't. It's like if you shoot a bullet at someone, right? And then the bullet, like, and you paused it, so the bullet was in midair. And you looked at the bullet's trajectory and you were like, yeah, that's going to kill that guy. It's heading towards that guy. It's going to kill him. Unless something happens, unless you get in the way of it, right? It's going to kill that guy. And somebody standing there being like, well, it hasn't killed him yet, so it's fine. That's more or less the conversation, right? So Putin needs to. Again, what's his alternative? What's his choice? Right? Not doing it, letting the Nazis power up and then start shelling the shit out of Moscow, and then you really have to escalate it, right? Then you really have to escalate it. No, like they're doing what they have to do, and they understand what they're looking at. Would it be so bad if nukes dropped on New York and London? I'm torn. I am not grinning. I'm not. It would be a catastrophe for the human species. I was watching British television in the Finnish-Russian border. All the Finns they interviewed literally thought Russia is a big bad monster. They need NATO to protect them. Yeah, I mean, Russia is scary. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, if I'm living in Finland and I am close, like, here's Finland, here's Russia, right? I'm not going, gee willikers, right? The Russians are so sweet and nice, right? Russia's scary, absolutely. Russia's scary. And if there's a military alliance of some sort that can protect Finland, should shit escalate, yeah, I understand it. Like, I don't hold it against Finland. I actually don't. Like, I'm not sitting here being like, I think it is stupid of them. Like, if I was Finland, my whole position would be, we are neutral. We are going to remain, we're going to sit this one out. And if I was Finland, that would be 100% my position the entire time. Just like, yep, well, you guys seem to be in a tiff. We are going to sit this one out. That to me would be the most sane approach. But people aren't running on sanity right now. Like, I mean, for goodness sakes, I found this meme, or not a meme, but like just a little blip. Open this. Open the link. Nearly 3/4 of Americans questioned backed increasing military aid to Ukraine. 3/4. 58% agreed with the statement that the U.S. should support Ukraine for as long as it takes, even if American households will have to pay higher gas and food prices as a consequence. So it's not just the leadership. And 38% thought the U.S. should send troops to Ukraine to fight the Russians, something that Biden has vowed not to do. 38%. So it's not just the leadership, right? It's easy to pretend like this is a battle amongst the leaders. It's the culture. It's the American culture. 58% are willing to face higher gas and food prices. 58%. If it means helping Ukraine fight this war. right? It's a Nazi culture. It's a Nazi civilization. Like that's what it is. It's fascist. At its true core, America is fascist. The people are fascist. We can talk about leadership all we want, but this is what the people think about it. And Americans are fucking insane. The people, not just the leadership. The American people are a liability, yeah. Which is why we have to continue doing this, and why we have to continue moving the bar, and why we have to continue talking about it, why we have to continue pushing, right? I'm not going down quietly. I'm not going down without a fight, right? And Igor Selkov said Russian will be in a situation worse than World War II because Putin making the same mistakes as Stalin. But what are these mistakes that we're talking about? Right? What are these mistakes that we're talking about here? I mean, like, Russia will be in a situation worse than World War II. Like, post World War II, the Russians defeated the Nazis, right? Like, of course, the Soviet Union was in a bad situation. They had to completely mobilize their entire culture in order to fight the most powerful military that the world had ever seen at that point, right? Like, the Nazis were no joke, and the Soviets were having to deploy grinding and brutal strategies, like the encirclement strategies, in order to prevent and face major casualties and major losses while they were doing it, in order to prevent the Blitzkrieg from overtaking the Soviet Union. So, like, I feel like, what are these mistakes that Igor Strelkov is talking about? To me, I just see a man who understands that there's a looming Nazi threat on his border, and understands that that threat has already shown it's willing to drop bombs and go to war against Russians already, right? Is already started a campaign against Russians. Like, what, you think that the campaign that that the Ukrainians were going against the Russians here, if it goes on that side of the border, it'll be better? Yeah, who taught them those things? They're all children. Yeah, can't really blame most of them. The situation is all messed up. I don't even think you can change most minds. I mean, I'm more or less of the opinion that a lot of the pounding of the war drum is just, like, I think that there are a lot of people walking around in the world who are essentially just reacting. That they have no sense of self. That they have no sense of their own internal existence. That they really are just reacting to stimuli and reacting to the demands of their body. And they don't actually pause and think about it. Which is why I think it is so important. You guys are gonna get it. You know what's coming. Everybody who follows for any length of time knows what's coming next. Which is why I think it's so important that you find some kind of system of thought to actually actively think about yourself, your body, your emotions, and where you are in the world. Because I think that most people are just passively in the world, right? And that if the system is working for your benefit as you perceive it, right? So you're a conservative, then you come up with trite solutions, right? Get a job, this sort of stuff. But if you can have those positions until finally the system fails you so badly that you can no longer maintain it. And you're seeing this manifest itself, especially in the libertarian right, the PPC here in Canada, the People's Party of Canada, especially, where people have been betrayed by the system that they previously defended, right? They know they've been betrayed by the system, but they don't know how or why because they don't understand the system, nor do they understand themselves within the system. Right? They're just reactionaries. They're just reacting. And I think that there's a lot more of these people than we think who are just reacting to external and internal stimuli. Right? They're just going, I'm hungry, I'm going to go eat. Right? They're just, oh, that guy's got a nice car. I better go get myself a nice car. Right? And so CNN blares across the media landscape, war with Ukraine, and it's a good thing to be at a war. And I think there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who just go, oh, war with Ukraine, it's a government thing, it's a I heard it, it's a thing, what the Russians do, it's unacceptable. And they don't know anything about the Donbass war. They don't know anything about that. They're not even skeptical of their media, right? Something like 45 to 50% of Canadians still trust the media, which I'm just like flabbergasted by. Like literally half? Wow. That's a staggering number to me. That's a staggering number. Right, reacting, I'm with you there, but maybe changing minds is wrong. Getting them to think properly or listen, trust to an individual over systems. Well, it's especially difficult to get people to listen to individuals because they don't even listen to themselves. Not really, right? Like outside of like their immediate demands and their impulses, right? Which they uncritically follow, right? And we're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it, right? That we all have impulses and desires and drives, and like very simple, rudimentary, basic shit. Like there's a pretty girl I like, I'm gonna go say hi, right? Like very basic shit, right? You see like young men pining over girls that have already said no and aren't interested anymore, but and their emotions take over and all that kind of stuff. It's because they don't have a handle on it. They don't have a handle on their own emotions, their own selves, because we don't actually talk about this stuff, right? We don't actually talk about emotions. We don't actually talk about getting a handle on yourself and how to actually do that and what path you should actually follow. We don't provide a visualization guide for it. It literally is suck it up, buttercup. That's the best I've ever seen, right? That's the best I've ever seen come out of this culture. Just, I'll suck it up. You get guys like Peterson, right? He's like, stand up straight. Just stand up straight and do what's right. Tell the truth. Right? As if that's just a gimme, right? I don't engage in the woman-man debate. I no manosphere shit here. You're not going to get manosphere shit from me. Because I think that what I see within the manosphere is men and women responding to each other without acknowledging that the positions that they are in are because of capital. That the system of capital is victimizing both women and men are seeing that victimization manifesting in women who they desire, and women are seeing that manifest in men who they desire, and they're critiquing one another, right? They're critiquing one another without acknowledging that what is happening is that both of the sexes are being victimized by capitalism. And so once again, capitalism is driving a wedge where one ought not to be in order to keep people at odds with one another instead of looking up and seeing who their true enemies are. So that's why I don't get into the manosphere stuff. You're never going to hear me say the trouble with women today is. It's never going to happen. Because I see what's happening to women very much how I see what's happening to men. That both are being victimized by a system of capital. And it's manifesting, and maybe you could point at it and say it is manifesting itself differently in the sexes, right? And create an analytical critique along those lines. But all that I see in the manosphere is women aren't touching my pee-pee and I'm mad about it. That's it. That's the long and short of what's happening in the quote-unquote manosphere. So it's not an actual critique. Yeah, capitalism destroyed marriage, relations, religion, spirituality, and women and men. And men. Right? That we are all victims of this system of capital. And it doesn't do us any favors and it's comfortable to do it. It's like a siren song. It's very natural. I find myself falling for it too. There's a fellow who kept popping up on my Twitter feed. His name is Sneko, right? Seems like a very charismatic young man who I think says a lot of things that are very from the heart and very, very passion driven. He lacks the analysis that the women that he's talking to are victims of capital, right? Straightforwardly. And is attempting to reinforce the old traditional way of thinking about how the sexes communicated with one another. And I think that's... I don't hate him for it. He's not like Andrew Tate, right? Who literally is a sex trafficker. Like, he's a young man who's struggling with his own sexuality and his own frustration, right? And his own frustration. I'm quite sympathetic, in fact. Of any of those guys, he's the one I'd like to talk to. Because when I see him and when I listen to him, I don't see him as a guy who is actively misogynist. I think that he's just a frustrated young man who's like, I want to get women. I desire women. Which is perfectly normal, right? Perfectly normal. And he's airing his frustrations. But the airing of the frustrations of men towards women there's nothing new about that. Men have been doing that for thousands of years. And just as women have been doing that for thousands of years, right? Like you can see it. The battle of the sexes rages eternally, right? Like it's not new. In the context of what we're doing here, it's also not helpful. And Compton, I know you're woke. Absolutely. John, I need you to know I'm woke. Absolutely, Con. I knew that of you the moment I met you. I'm like, here's a woke person right here. No one is more woke than this person. I hate that woke shit, dude. I'll never say it seriously. Right? I always put quotations in it if I'm going to refer to it. I just find it to be such a annoying, dismissive kind of phrase. You know what I mean? Like, I think when it first originated, like the phrase "stay woke," like it makes all the sense in the world. Be aware that you live in imperial capitalism. That's how it began. But then it got completely co-opted, and it didn't get co-opted by like the social justice warriors and the type. It got co-opted by the right and then used as a pejorative, right? And now it's successfully become a pejorative. And you can sort of see why it's been successful, because there is a type of person who wants to just immediately accuse you of racism, immediately accuse you of like transphobia, in order to shut down a conversation and stop having a class discussion. And to me, that's woke behavior, right? Like that's what I think of. Milo, come on, dude. But the original meaning of the whole stay woke idea, right? That whole thing. Milo, dude. I know, right? See, I'm saying woke. Milo hates that shit. Okay, Milo. That's good. Thanks, bud. Good boy. Good boy, buddy. I'm safe. I was feeling not so safe, and now I feel safe. There's something good about cleaning your room. All my dishes are done, so I feel better. Yeah. The rest of JP is 100% BS, though. I mean, yeah, clean your room, right? But like, that's not advice, really, right? Like, yeah, obviously. Like, clean up your room, clean, do your dishes. Like, it's not advice, you know? It's sloppy to pretend that patriarchy has an equivalent analog to misandry. Yes, I do. I do somewhat see what you're saying with that. That the dismissal of men and it exists. Like there, you can see clips of women saying that we don't need men, right? Like that kind of thing, which, which I think is destructive, just as destructive as the other direction, right? And like all of this, but the reality is the power structure has been has been ruled by men. Like it's a patriarchy. Like there are a few glimmering examples of that not being the case, but go woke, go broke. After my wife and I separated, I came across a video about how women are so awful and men are victims. Yeah, that shit will tap into your lizard brain. Yeah, I couldn't listen all the way through, but it's true though, right? It's true, right? You start to get into this kind of thing of like, yeah, why aren't I getting any women? Like, why I can't? I don't understand. You know what? It's women these days, right? Come on, like it's exactly the narrative that men use 100% of the time. And the reason why I talk about a guy like Snecko and I don't dismiss him is because his solution is focus on yourself, right? The phrase he always uses is get your money up, right? Which is like, you know, an admission that the thing to do is to continue doubling down on your own victimization, right? Get your money up. But I think it's not unhealthy. You know what I mean? Like, if you're struggling to attract members of the opposite sex, or you're finding that to not be something that you are enjoying, right? Then focus on yourself, right? Build yourself. And I think there definitely is something to that. I think that's, to bring up Jordan Peterson again, I think that is the reason why he's been so successful, because building yourself up is exactly correct. Like that is what you should be doing, right? You should be doing that all the time. You should and like that's what like when I talk about the chakra system, what am I talking about? Right? I'm talking about self-analysis, self-critique, right? Building yourself up. A lot of it is about affirmations, right? Is about saying things that maybe you don't believe, but you hope you will believe one day, right? Tinker deleting messages. The shame. And I think you're absolutely right, Dan. People's insecurity is a big part of the problem. That it is insecurity, right? That like, and a lot of these guys prey on that insecurity. That's kind of the case in point with like a lot of these kind of cultish figures, right? Is that they're preying on people's insecurities, and you're trying to isolate people and make sure that they have nowhere else to go. So you're constantly preying on people's insecurity, and my advice is always focus on yourself and focus on the system, right? That when you see people acting crazy or acting in a way that is unacceptable in your view, right? Chances are very good that is happening because they are responding to or reacting to a system that is abandoning them, right? Like, if you, like, you go to school every day, and there's this one young man who is real quiet, seems really detached, doesn't really want to engage, right? Seems kind of like a weirdo. Right? Like, and you could dismiss him and you could judge him for that kind of thing. But then what if you find out that he's going home and getting beaten up every day by his dad or something who's drunk? It's going to change your perspective of that person. That there's something going on in the background that you have not been privy to. Right? And I feel like we see a lot of that these days. I think that we're seeing a lot of people reacting to this system of extraction and abandonment, and a lot of people are reacting from the gut or from the root in a reactionary kind of a way. They're not looking they're not looking to address the system. They're just looking for their own survival and to gratify their own needs in an immediate kind of a sense. And because that's the only thing that the system is permitting people to do, and it's very difficult for me to take that personally. It's very difficult for me to see a person who is reacting to a system that's structured to abandon people, and then judge them for it. You know. Here's my take. My honest advice towards men: study feminism, find the best theorists, and just learn their shit. One or two things are happen. Either you change or you prove them wrong. Yeah, don't engage with Tumblr feminism. Yeah, just read some bell hooks and see if it makes any kind of sense. I agree with this. Yeah, like, look, at its core, feminism is simply attempting to say we would like to be treated with a degree of equality. We would like to be treated as equals in this conversation. And it makes sense that the society doesn't really know how to manifest that. It makes sense that we don't really know how to do that. And right now, the solution has been take all of the women and put them in the workforce too. And we're seeing how that's a disaster for everybody, because capitalism is a system that's a disaster, right? So everyone's exhausted. Everyone's tired. So previously we had this dynamic where women stayed home, did the housework, right? That was the whole shtick. Right? Men went into the workforce and made enough money to support them, right? That was the arrangement. And now the economy has collapsed completely. It's a system of extraction and abandonment, and women have been forced into the workforce. So yeah, of course we're struggling with sexual relations. Of course we're struggling. Everyone's exhausted. Everyone's frustrated. Everyone's tired. And when people attempt to pursue these sorts of things, they don't have time to waste, right? And so this is being interpreted as people's standards have risen. I just think that, like, you know, if you don't have that much time to waste, you're going to try to get the big fish, right? And it seems to me that. I think about the manosphere, and I just say, I would love to talk to these guys and just be like, guys, like, if you want this to start easing off, if you want this negotiation between the sexes to get easier, you should be turning your gaze on the system of capital. You should be demanding that everybody get more time off. You should be demanding that we get an increase in pay. You should be demanding that we get systems put in place that are pro-family and pro-sexual relations. You should be demanding that the society slow the fuck down and actually become conducive. You should be demanding that the society become sex positive. You should be demanding that the society become a place where people can relax, where the conversation that's happening between a man and a woman doesn't have the stakes of survival in play. Because right now it does. Like, right now it does. Survival stakes are in play because the system is collapsing. And if these manosphere guys actually turned their gaze towards the capitalist system, they could do a lot of damage, I think. Yeah, before there was some sort of order and structure at home. Now it's chaos. People don't know how to live. That's the result. I'm not saying women should stay home, but their option seems to be gone. And even if one household figures it out for themselves, it doesn't necessarily align with what other households are doing, right? That there is this fracturing of the society. That, like, half the society works in the evening and half the society works in the morning. And half the society works during the weekday and half the society works during the weekend. And so it can never actually talk to itself and actually address these issues and address these things. It's chaos. Let chaos reign, right? The free market has decided. Let chaos reign. That's what's happened. That's where we're at. So I got 10 minutes on the clock. I'm going to do a rapid fire. Welcome to the rapid fire. We're done with that. We're done with that. We're done with that. We're done with that. Having a job is weird because we're in the middle of a major extinction event. Yeah, how many times have I said that? how it feels to be alive today, existing. That'll be $70. Okay. Doesn't it ever? This doesn't matter. Oh yeah. Disturbing. Experts troubled by Canada's euthanasia laws. This is actually a really good article, so I'm actually going to save this one for tomorrow. And I'm going to forefront that one. This is about the medically assisted dying system. And it's actually quite a robust article, as you can see. So I want to actually give this one a lot more credence. And we're going to be reporting on that one tomorrow. Or, I guess, Monday. Oh, Christ. Time flies. Here's a great video of the Patriot Front. Here's some footage from Patriot Front meetings. The Patriot Front is a far-right organization. Even they would say that they are far-right. Many of them call them Nazis. That seems believable. Here they are doing training exercises, right? With their shields and their flags. Isn't it nice that they're getting fun little costumes? And isn't it great that they look like Captain America shields? Normal society. Normal people doing normal things. Training for inevitable street combat. Totally normal. Singh warns against boosting private health services. We can't allow that to happen. That would be great, right? That would be great. I don't necessarily believe Singh, but I'm glad that he's saying it, right? Hey, maybe don't privatize this shit, right? Don't privatize the healthcare system. What do you think, right? Toronto millennials want to be homeowners, but only 22% believe they can do it in the city. Survey. Straight up no shit moment right here. Like, yeah, 22%. Wow. 22% believe that they can actually get a house. Wild. Lucky people. Yeah, and most GTA millennials who aspire to buy a home would need to relocate. We were just talking about how the society has fallen into chaos, and how it's been a disaster in terms of the negotiation in the sexes. Well, this is a big reason for it, right? People need to relocate to find work. People need to relocate to find a home, right? People are having to tear up their whole life, say farewell to their friends, say farewell to their families, say farewell to their connections, say farewell to their communities in order to go get basic things like a job or a home, right? What is this but total chaos? Free market, capitalism, making it happen. Let chaos reign. Oh yeah. Former CTV anchor Lloyd Robertson speaks out on Lisa LaFlame's ouster. So for those of you who don't know, Lisa LaFlame was let go. Yeah, I'll just say she held on to her own integrity all through with the old man from the beginning. This is total bullshit. Sorry what he's saying. I'm trying to just give you a snippet here. I hate, this is some shitty ass reporting. Who's LaFlame? Why do we care? She's a CTV anchor who was pressing on an issue that the owners didn't like, and so they shit-canned her, right? They yeah, it's wrong they sacked her, but fuck them all, journalists and mainstream media. But now you're seeing why they're like the way they are, right? That they themselves are also victims, right? They themselves are also victims. They have to act that way, because if they don't, they get shit-canned, right? That it's a vetting system. If you stand up and say something the owners don't like, then you're no longer in the system. And now they're being overt about it. They're being obvious about it. Like literally this was as straight up as it gets. Oh, here's a journalist who said some things I don't like, so I'm getting rid of her. It honestly was unabashedly, no excuses made, no PR team involvement, nothing like that. It was literally, that's the narrative. Even by the people who did it. That's straight out. They're just like, yeah, we got rid of her because we didn't like what she was saying. That's the conversation. And so here we have, Bell Media tweeted a statement last Friday expressing its regret. You know how they could have really expressed their regret? by rehiring her. That would be a good way to express regret. The cut has outraged so many Canadians a petition to reinstate Laflamme as chief anchor already has 150,000 signatures and counting. That's not going to happen. They got rid of her for a reason. They've released their statement. They said, "I'm sorry," and that's the end of the conversation. Like, welcome to feudalism, kids. That's what's happening. U.S. airstrikes target militia-controlled areas in East Syria. So, Syria getting bombed by the Empire. Isn't it because she would dye her gray hair? Is that really the cause? I thought that it was that she was... Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whatever, who cares, yeah. Co-founder Pink Floyd Roger Waters criticizes the U.S. media for reporting on China and Taiwan region, right? Pink Floyd has been going around. Roger Waters has been going around. Roger Waters has been going around saying to people, look, for the last 50 years, we have been saying that Taiwan is part of China. What the hell are we doing? Right? What are we doing? Why are we acting this way? It's just bullshit imperialism. That's coming from lead singer Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, which I love it. That's another one I want to hang on to. I'm going to hang on to this one. It's always good to listen to the opinions of people who you disagree with, especially when they're speaking from the heart. And this is one, if you tune in on Monday, 6 months after the Freedom Convoy, Trudeau's lies and cowardice are clearer than ever. I've actually never seen a more concise and clear statement about what has happened with the Freedom Convoy. And I found when I was reading this, I found that I was nodding along most of the time. That, yeah, I think it is wrong that they evoked the Emergencies Act. I think it is wrong that they didn't even have a formal conversation with them. To me, that's the big thing about the Freedom Convoy. Like, they're still Canadian citizens. That it's not good enough to stand up and say, oh, these guys, what a bunch of goobers, and this and that and the other thing. Oh, they're this, they're that. Oh, they're on this political spectrum. They're over here, they're over there. Okay, great. They're still Canadian citizens. They're still protected by Canadian law, if these laws exist anymore and have any veracity whatsoever. Like, to me, the evocation of the Emergencies Act, it's criminal. So, tune in on Monday. Poll results suggest Canadians think grocery stores are taking advantage of inflation. So this is essentially 78% say grocery stores are taking advantage of inflation to make increased profits. So finally, for once, we have the Canadian public not acting like morons. Actually going, oh, wait a minute. These guys are just raising the prices. 78% is a big number. That's a big number. You can create a lot of political turmoil and shift a lot of political opinions with a number like that, right? Why aren't the NDP saying we are going to do something about this? To be fair to the NDP's position, they are saying that they want to tax the rich, right? They are saying that, to be fair. Will they be able to sway the populace? Will the populace actually believe that the NDP are actually interested in doing something like this? Or has this narrative of the NDP are the junior partners of the Liberal Party taken hold? Only time shall tell. 4-day workweek trial at Toronto tech company led to unanticipated result, right? That unanticipated result, people liked it. No shit. All right, guys. We've made it to the end of this one. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. A temporal refugee. The billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to make sure you never realize it. You just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.